G'day Mega Mob, AOS Coach here, and we are talking about Gloomspites Gitz, specifically the trolls and Trug stuff when it comes to the Gloomspites Gitz. I am here with a man who needs no introduction. He has put down his glowy howzit to talk to me, and that is Dom Stonebridge, one of the top Gitz players and probably one of the best troll players I know. If there's another one, I don't know where you are. You're probably in your dang cold cave. But Dom has come back. Dom gave great insights in the past. And when I got this book, this new Brute Dawnbringers book, and we have some new rules for the trolls and a new hero model, I thought, what better person to kind of unpack this with me and getting me to think about, do I run an army of Renown? Do I run my traditional King's Gitz or my mob? Or how do I start thinking about this as a General's Handbook 2023 thing? So I guess that's probably the two areas of focus for today. One, how is Dom thinking about General's Handbook 2023 as a Troggoth player? And then two, how are we thinking about the Trug, the king of the trolls, and just the army of Renown, a completely new way of running your Troggoths. But that was my big-winded introduction. I'm going to pass it over to Dom. G'day, welcome back. Introduce yourself for those who may not know who you are.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks for having me back, mate. Yeah, super excited to talk about Troggs again for an hour or two. Would never pass up that opportunity. Yeah. So I'm Dom. I'm a UK-based AOS player, predominantly playing Gitz. Play a bit of Gargants and Stormcast Eternals as well. And have historically played Fire Slayers too. And I'll be playing for England this year at Six Nations, which is exciting. So still trying to convince them to let me take Troggs at the moment, but it's a work in progress. So fingers crossed. Yeah, mate, pleasure to be back.
And congratulations for the Six Nations. I know that is a big accomplishment in the UK, especially for the folks at home from America or Australia who may not know the process. A lot of the stuff happens at Six Nations, and then a lot of those players will ultimately qualify or be shortlisted to get into the World's team, which happens around May. The World's tournament happens, so the best of the best tournament. So you are definitely one of the right people to be on the team, and someone who's done really well. You know, you've done 5-0s, 4-1s. Like, you're someone who does very well with the Troggs. How are you feeling so far in GHB23? The Antorian Locust, the Wizard Blizzards, or Blizzard Wizards. How are you feeling trolls at the moment in the current season? We're 3 months in. How are you feeling?
Yeah, good. I think they're in a good place. They're certainly not. I wouldn't put them in like Troggs. Talking about Troggs specifically, not Gitz. I wouldn't put Troggs in the absolute top bracket. And you're still going to have games where you have to push uphill, and you're probably on the back foot, and you have to like go for some big plays and not make any mistakes, otherwise you'll get punished. But I think they're in a good place. I think tactics maybe forces you down certain list building routes. Because it's not that you don't want Troggs within 6 of a board edge, for example. I know we'll come on to all this, but you very much want to be staying in your castle, and then similarly, the incredible spells that are available, whether it's Hoarfrost or Merciless Blizzard, I think also just forces you down a certain list building route as well, where I've always personally been taken as a minimum a couple of sort of foot wizards. So I think Troggs are in a good place, but yeah, then I wouldn't put them in like the absolute top bracket, but certainly push them 4-1. I even think 5-0 with a good run. So yeah.
Yeah, Gitz as a faction in general is not in its best spot. 6 months ago, when you had the new book and Squigs were running Hulkamania, Troggs were going crazy, Gitz were definitely at their peak. They're kind of now tailed to be like middle of the pack, win rate of like 52 to 48%, depending on what your data source may be between the 3 different areas of data analytics. But they're doing well, and they still can go 5-0, 4-1. Obviously takes a good pilot, the good matchups, good strategy. But they're definitely not the big bad like Ossiarch Bone Reapers, Soul Blight, Khorne, Seraphon. They're not the boogeyman right now.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think 2 of those armies that you mentioned in there, Khorne and Seraphon, as I think one of the big reasons that Gitz are being kept quite honest, especially when I think about Troggs, because Khorne, if you think about Troggs or Squigs, Khorne have the ability to shut down a lot of what you're trying to do. So a Khorne player could pin you in with what is probably one of the best abilities in AOS, which is Murderlust. Being able to move in your opponent's hero phase and tag people in combat. You can pin a Trog castle. You can shut down the squig charge, which is a big part of how that list operates. And then when you think about Seraphon, splash mortal wounds and just sheer mortal wound volume output is a huge problem for Gitz. Small 4-wound heroes that can be lifted in 2 turns with a comet. Trog's a bit more survivable, but the slow movement, I think, means you're probably going to be taking 2 or 3 rounds of mortal wound output from a top Seraphon player before you manage to get hold of the squishy stuff. So those 2 armies especially, I think, are what are keeping Gitz honest, and you're going to come up against 1 or 2 every tournament, in my opinion. If you don't, you've done very well to avoid them.
Yeah,
so.
let alone like so one of my last tournaments, not the last tournament, the tournament before, I played with my Gitz against a Khorne player. First off, Hex Gorgeous Skulls scares the heck out of me.
Yeah.
2, Primal miscasting with Khorne now with the Skull Altar is just murder for all of my little wizards. And I'm the idiot that's running around with all these little 5-wound bad snatcher wizards. I'm like, okay, and like I had big grapefruits, and I went, you know what? I'm taking magical dominance as my first spell, my first battle tactic. And I got it.
Yeah, but probably my favorite thing is just GHB is the most tense role in the game now is the turn 1 Mystic Shield that everyone casts for magical dominance. Like watching someone cast Mystic Shield on a 20 and then you try and unbind it is just an AOS game I never thought I'd be playing, but I love it. It's genuinely great fun.
Do you think, like, now we're talking wizards and stuff, and we will get into the rules, folks. We'll talk about the General's Handbook rules, the Gitz rules, and obviously the Army of Renown, which is brand new, and we'll kind of unpack this a little. But maybe, like, take a step back for a second. Let's imagine I'm someone who's just gone to my local game store, and I've picked up the army box right now. So it's called an Army of Renown. I think it is the new King Trug, as well as, is it 6 rock guts or 9 rock guts? I can't remember how many rock guts are in there. But it's a small little starting pack. And if I'm a Gitz player who is, I don't know, maybe I'm running squigs or spiders right now, do I have to go 100% trolls? Do you think 100% trolls is viable? Or do you still like mixing a little bit of like squigs, grots, spiders?
Yeah, I definitely lean way more towards a mixed arms list. I think like, and obviously we'll come on the Army of Renown soon. I think you could definitely take an all Trog list if it was like a 1-dayer and you had the battle plans and they were all like low objective count, like 3s and 4s. You know, you've got the Pulse and you've got a couple of the other lower objective ones. I think you could probably do all right with an all Trog army. But I think to get the most out of Trogs, and I think to get the most out of the variety of battle plans we've now got and battle tactics, I think it's really important to lean into some of the other areas as well. So like a unit of 20 stabbers is just a phenomenal screen. You know, rallies on a 4-up, can take an objective early, so you don't need to put one of your important units on the front line. The Gobbapalooza is just, for me, one of the most sensational units in the game. Effectively, a 15-wound wizard with a 4-up ward that rallies on a 4-up. I use them as a turn 1 screen, and it's, you know, you've got to get through 30 wounds just to get through them. And if you don't, they're going to come back on the 4-up from the shrine, and you're going to rally them back as well. So, and then I think just MSU units of Boingrot Bounders, Squigs, I'm really, really keen on this edition with Hoarfrost. They can trade exceptionally well, and they're great for tactics as well. You've got like Stab 'em in the Dark and the Gitz book. You've got the Board Edge one. They're a unit you can put in places you don't want to be, but you know you can get them back in the fight. Whereas I think if you go with all Trogs, you're going to find yourself running out of tactics, I think, quicker than what you'd expect. And the last thing I'd say on that is the big reason for that is there's felt like a real shift in AOS over the past couple of months to a place where people are building armies now with the thought of, I just want to get 1-2 more in a tactic. And there's a lot of armies out there now that don't have to engage with you to achieve that. And I think that's where Trogs start to fall down, because Trogs want to be fighting. They want to be killing stuff. They want to be lifting things that your opponent wouldn't expect to lose in around the combat. And if you're up against one of the many lists now that can just score tactics without coming near you, that's going to be a real problem for Trogs. Whereas if you bring in the Squigs and the Grots and stuff, you've got ways around that effectively.
Yeah, like the old Gloomspite Gitz book felt like it was forcing you down one route. I always felt that as a Squig player, I wanted to put all of my toys in Squigs, and I would rarely go outside of Squigs because of just the way it was super restrictive. Now it does feel like a lot like it wants to have a bit of not a mixed arms. I definitely wouldn't try to have trolls, spiders, grots, and squigs in one list. But you absolutely can mix and match and kind of play to your strengths and play to your weaknesses. You mentioned speed, right? You know, with particularly Troggs, you don't have the speed. And to your point, surround and destroy, you don't want to be putting 3 of your fell waters or your dank holds on the different flanks, right? Like, it doesn't make any sense. But what I can do is pay for 5 spider riders for 90 points and send 2 of them over the flank. Or I could buy some hoppers or some boingrots who have really good movement and go rush over really quickly and then kind of come back into the fight. So where you play to your strengths, which is a lot of healing, a lot of durability with your ward, you know, you do slap quite well. You've got some good mortal wounds, especially from your rock throwing. You can kind of combine that nicely with some screens, with some speed from other, you know, the magic side, definitely outside of Trogs. The magic is stronger, whether it's Scraggy, whether it's the Fungoid Cave Shaman, and it plays well to the season. So can you play 100% Trogs? Yes. Should you? It's up to you. If you want to look outside as well, yeah, do some stuff.
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree. Yeah, I think if you're looking to build like the most effective list, it's going to get you for a 2-day. I think you definitely want to be bringing a mix. But I think like if you've got a little 1 day, I wouldn't be. I mean, I'm taking an all Trog list to a tournament, a 1 day this coming Friday, because it's just like a sort of a fun invitational before a 2-day. And I'm going to push around Trug, funnily enough, the one that we're going to talk about later on today, just to see what you can do. So it's definitely viable, but I think you miss out on a lot. There's some really good stuff in the Gitz book. It doesn't have to be the heartbeat of your army, but can really take a Trog list from like a 3-2 list to push it into like a 4-1-5-0 bracket, in my opinion.
Have you got any favorite units right now, or even favorite combinations, given, you know, we've got the height of Slaanesh running around with Pretenders doing all the pew-pews. You've got Khorne, you know, doing a lot of mortal wounds and certain things. You know, OBR has gotten a little less powerful, but certainly still is very powerful, especially when you look at your Immortus Guard. And, you know, like when you read the meta, are there particular units that stand out for you right now in Gitz that help you play into the meta or potentially anticipate these top tier armies?
Yeah, so I think you've already touched on that. I mean, our shamans are super important, and one shaman I've pivoted to more this season has been actually the web spinner, purely because he's got a 5-up ward, and I've found that my madcaps and my fungoids in this current meta, especially pre-Spirit Gale nerf, like obviously Spirit Gale's been nerfed now, but Spirit Gale's ability to do it was a Soulblight Gravelord spell that if you got it on a less than a 9, every single model on the board took 1 mortal wound. If you got it on more than a 9, everything took 2. So across 2 turns, you were possibly losing like 2 or 3 shamans against Soulblight Gravelords, and then straight away you're on the back foot in a meta that's dominated by magic and where spells are really important. So I've found web spinner shamans, interestingly, as one of the MVPs in my list this season, just because I can keep them round. You can give them Hoarfrost as well, which is obviously a phenomenal spell, which maybe makes up for the other spells that you might not necessarily lean to with them. And then similarly, the Gobberpalooza, I'm going to throw them in there again for 2 reasons. Firstly, I tend to be high drops with Gitz because I don't feel like they necessarily need that low drop, and I like the ability to lean into all those extra artifacts and Doris, the battalion, which we'll come on to soon, which I think is phenomenal. But what the real value I've got from Gobberpalooza is you can put them right at the front of your army, so they're a screen, but then you're also giving yourself 2 unbinds. If your opponent takes first, you're not giving away an easy magical dominance. And then you can backboard your other wizards. And you're like, if you give me first, I'll go for magical dominance. You can't get me, but if you take it, the Palooza will try and stop you. So I found them super useful and also really good in the Khorne match. I've charged them into 3 or 4 core units in a turn before and just knowing they'll stick around with a 4-up ward, just tagging the end of units, meaning they then can't murderlust you back when you go, so they can't shut you down in your turn. So yeah, Gobberpalooza and Web Spinner Shaman are my weird two MVPs this edition so far.
I would 100% agree with you on the Gobberpalooza, and it's for different reasons too. The amount of value I've gotten from their War Scroll spell, so Mesmerize, stopping them issuing and receiving commands, has been so impactful.
Yeah.
The Fungoid Cloud, giving yourself a 12-inch -1 to hit bubble, is so good,
Yeah.
especially when you stack it with
Yeah.
netters. Then you have a -2 bubble, so
Yeah.
stopping them from getting any like cancellation from all-out attack. Let alone like being able to pick either a hero or a unit or yada 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 to get that -1 onto the rend, +1 hit, +1 to wound, or the +1 to run and charge. Like the utility in the Gobbapalooza is so good. It's so good.
Sensational. Yeah, and the mesmerize spell actually in some of the current matchups like OBR mesmerize is game winning if you can get that off on the block, that block of 6 and Mortis Guard.
I did.
Then I mean you've seen it. Then it's just incredible. They go from being borderline impossible to shift to then they can't get that ward, they can't save stack, and it's super impactful. So the spells are brilliant as well.
I'd say another unit I've fallen in love with lately, and I didn't use it for a while, and I only brought it in because I had some spare points, and it was like, do I bring 5 spiders in, or do I bring in 5 spore splatter fanatics?
Mm-hmm.
And for 90 points for that +1 attack bubble, as well as the 2d6 move, as well as blocking line of sight, which is obviously very helpful for anyone who's trying to like snipe me. Also being able to make a pre-game move if I need to after deployment. Like if I want to get onto an objective early, if I want to like zone out and screen KO, for example, nice little way to kind of push out a little. I think for 90 points, it's not too bad.
Yeah, I'm pleased you brought them up. Actually, I've run them in the majority of my lists that I play. The 2d6 pre-game move is brilliant, especially if you drop your opponent and you want them to come to you as like a Trog player. That's super helpful. And yeah, the other great thing actually is their Bravery 10, which might sound weird when it's only a 5 wound unit, but if somebody's done some splash damage and they've killed a couple, that's just in a Gitz book having to not worry about a unit for bravery. It's actually quite useful because so you can sort of keep some other stuff around against those splash damage armies. And the block and line of sight is great. When I've had games where someone's had Blizzard, like the Soulbright Gravelords build used to be able to teleport the hero in Blizzard and you couldn't stop it because it was a heroic action. It's obviously been changed now because of the FAQ to Blizzard, but I used to wrap my damn called Trog boss in the 5 spore splatters at the start of the game because obviously it's my grand strategy, and I was kind of like, well, if you want to come over here and Blizzard 5 spore splatters, then like be my guest, but I'm just not going to let you touch my Trog boss. So yeah, they are great for 90 points. Come back from the shrine, rally on the 4-up, all the other juicy stuff as well. So yeah, great little unit.
Folks, I think you're hearing from us, like, can you do 100% Trogs? Absolutely. Is there some cool, interesting things in the book? And, you know, whether it's the Loon Smasher Fanatics, whether it's Grin Crack, I've started to really enjoy, like, the Skitterstrand Spider just on its own. For 180 points, like, it's actually quite a good little piece that you can manipulate and play around with. And I guess this is the pros and the cons of playing Gitz, right? The pros is you have an incredible depth of units that you can build around. And if you are someone who doesn't care about the most optimal synergies and you just want to run the most fun things, you absolutely can. But at the same time, you can find units that can often respond into the meta. You can find things that will help you kind of adapt and tweak your list. And I think the book is deep enough that allows you, with different sub-factions like I'm doing. I used to run a lot of King's Gitz and a lot of Jaws of Mork. In this season, I've gone to Bad Snatchers to really play in and double down on the wizard element of the season and the book. And it's been very different the way I look at my list versus the King's Gitz and, you know, going for regeneration and yada, yada, yada.
Yeah, I started off with Bard Snatchers, actually. I did my first 2 tournaments, I did with Bard Snatchers, and I did really like it. And I think when people first looked at that, they thought it wouldn't be great because you couldn't add primals to the reroll. But what I found was you were getting so many spells off that people were having to take a decision every single time to try and stop a spell because you were just constantly getting your spells off. You know, you were like, might want to hit bubble. Like, well, I want to stop that. But you've got it because you've rerolled. Do I need to trick a primal in this, or am I going to wait for the teleport and Blizzard? It was really interesting, actually. I was surprised by how impactful Bard Snatchers was when I ran it. It's actually a really good sub-faction this edition.
I basically find that everyone lets my spells off unless it's Scragrot's Fangs of the Bad Moon, Hoarfrost, or Blizzard. Other than that, Itchy Nuisance, the Mesmerize, all of my spells go off. And it's really cool that like I can just get out of like miscasts and yada, yada, yada. But this is not the Bad Snatchers show. This is the Troggoth specific one. And obviously you can run all the Troggoths. If you wanted to run all the Troggoths and have a couple of wizards to really double down, You could also do Bad Snatcher still with Troggs. You do you. We're not here to stop you. But what I am here to talk about is one of the new units that are coming through from this book. So I did mention this. It is in the AOS app. I was rereading it the other day, kind of list teching after my game yesterday against Seraphon at the top tables, and I dropped it because of all the splash mortal wounds that Dom's talking about. I'm like, I wonder what this guy could do for me. Can he help me? But this unit is available for both sides. So you've got your traditional Gitz, but there's something else in this particular book, and that is a new, essentially, sub-faction. I'm going to simplify it and call it a sub-faction. It's called an Army of Renown, and an Army of Renown is a set of specific rules that you use from the page, and I'll flick over in a second to the page. The trade-off is you can't use anything else in the book. So any battalions or any of the artifacts and things like that, you can't use them. So and this one in particular is very restrictive. So you can't bring in anything that's not a Troggoth. So we'll get to that in a second. I want to kind of isolate and just look at our brand new war scroll. That is Trug, the Troggoth King. Now, if you look at this particular war scroll, there's a lot going on here. 18 wounds, 4 up save, 2 melee attacks, both Ren 2 do have some very high potential damage with D6 and D3 plus 3. The thing that's probably most interesting to some people will obviously one being a War Master, being able to be treated as a general. You have regeneration and you get some extra regeneration. But the rule that probably is capturing most people is this particular malfunctioning laystone, which is the funny little thing sitting on the back, and they all have the different glyphs of the realms of AOS and Magic, and each of the glyphs do different things. And the way that kind of works is at the start of the hero phase, your hero phase, if this unit's on the battlefield, you can say that it will clobber its malfunctioning laystone. If you do so, the roll is equal to the value shown on the table. So basically, as you suffer wounds, so 0 to 6 on the profile, you get 4 rolls, down to 3, down to 2, and then when he's on 13 plus, it's 1 roll. You then pick your favorite dice roll to either get D3 mortal wounds suffered if you roll a 1. Obviously, that you only accept that when you are only on 1 dice. You can add +1 attack characteristic to melee, improve the rend by 1. You can receive an extra command point on a 2+. You get unmodified hit rolls of 6s. You force your opponent to only hit you with an unmodified 6 roll. So a nice little debuff there, as well as a 5+ ward. A lot going on here. I'm going to pause for a second. I just said that for the podcast, folks. I'm sure people on YouTube have read this already. He is a leader, he is Behemoth, and he is unique at 320 points. So Mr. Troggherd himself, Dom, what do you think of this war scroll? And talk me through your thinking when you look at this, and do you like it? Do you not like it? Does it fit certain builds? Is it like what is it you see here?
Yeah, so I think when I first saw the war scroll, I think initially I was a little bit like, not underwhelmed, maybe a strong word, but I think I was hoping for more of an ability to buff things around him. I think that's where I was most disappointed. Obviously, we then learned about the Army of Renown, which was the ability to have his Layer-stone to impact all of the other Trogs around him, which I think does make him actually quite powerful when he gets the ability to do that. But the more I've looked at it, the more I've thought about it. I've even actually played a game with him now. It's actually a decent war scroll, and I think there's a few things in here that I think make it that way. So that the first is the fact that he's a War Master is really interesting, because if you put him in your Gitz army, without having to make him general, without having to make a Dan called Trogboss general, he unlocks Trogs as battle line. So there's a really interesting bit of play in there where you could take a Moon Clan general and give it clammy hands. So suddenly you've got a Trog army with Trog battle line, because Trug's a War Master, so he unlocks the Rockguts and the Fell Waters, and you've now also opened up the clammy hand, the double bring back on the 4-up. Which is really nice in the Trog army, and not something that you've previously been able to do, because you've typically had to general a Dan called Trog boss, and then he can't take clammy hand, essentially. So and it's similar to how putting Scragrot in unlocks Squig battle line. putting him in your army does the same. So I really like that part about like the War Master part. The malfunction and Laystone thing it's great for him. I mean, if you can get him a 5-up ward, that is brilliant. If you're playing like an army like KO and you can get that unmodified 6s to shoot, you can hit rolls of 6 from shooting attacks is the only thing that goes through. You could use them to soak up and unleash hell into like an ironclad or a brick of thunderers. So there is some nice play in there. I think if you're putting him in a Gitz army, though, he's predominantly going in for the fact that he's unlocking Trog Battle Line and the fact that he's a monster as well, which you'll never grumble at. Because historically, to get a monster in a Trog list, again, you've had to give a specific artifact, command trait to a damn called Trog boss. And again, he takes away that need. So you can go with Loon Skin now much more comfortably, which gets you a free endless spell. So I think rather than just looking at his war scroll alone, I think what he's done is he's unlocked some quite interesting stuff around him. And you can't sniff at his damage profile. You know, D6 is obviously quite swingy, but if he gets all out attack from the Trog boss, he's going to get +1 attack. So something like he's at 7 and his other one's at 3. You know, he's a hero, so he can find a star himself. You can seriously put in some work. And if you don't kill him dead, he's probably going to almost fully healed back up within a couple of turns because the D3+3.
Yeah, that's a really good call. Like the regeneration and then imbued with life. So regeneration, he gets his D3 heals, which is great at the start of the hero phase. So yours and mine. And then imbued with life is when you make that roll, you get to add 3 to the dice roll. So you're at minimum healing 4, maximum healing 6, which is a huge swing. The most negative thing I kind of got a little bit of sad about is that every other troll has that 5-up ward, and he has to activate the glyph in order to get the ward. So pre-glyph, he has no ward. So I worry a little bit with, do I have to keep him 5-up ward all the time? And if not, because I really want to add +1 attack, and the the Iron Shell Club, for example, starts at attack 4, so that'll make it a 5. Or more importantly, I really want to activate that Glyph of Akshi to get those attacks both at Ren -3, because if they go through, those D6 and the D3+3 are some very big damage swings.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's it. I think early game you're going to always be fishing for the ward, and then maybe you wait for that big turn where you're going to put him in with your other units, and then you get brave and you go for the +1 attack or the extra round. And obviously we'll come on to talk about this soon, but in a normal Gitz list, like, these numbers are just going to bump. You know, you take Spore Splatters, get +1 attack to all that, he gets all out attack from Trog Boss, plus another one, you get the +1 attack, he's now at +3. You got Mommet in there, you know, you've got your Gobbapalooza, he's effective -4 rounds. He'll throw down with most units in the game, I think, if you stack the buffs on him. And the fact he's a monster is genuinely great, because one of the things that Trogs struggle with is objective control, because they're that annoying 4 wounds area. So you want objectives, and the ability to slide just a monster onto an objective and suddenly get 5 more is nothing that I have a sniff at. And the monstrous action, right? So a raw in a Trog list is great. Like, when you've got so much rounds, not being able to reduce round 2 to effective round 1 with an auto defense is absolutely brilliant. So I like him. I'm probably gonna try him in a few lists. Possibly influenced a little bit by the rule of cool, but I do think he plays a part.
Yeah, he's awesome. He is awesome.
Yeah.
And I actually did a size comparison on Twitter, and it is the same, or X, sorry. But it's the same size as the Troggoth Hag. So if you are someone who loves their Troggoth Princess and they want to get her back on the table, I'm sure on the right... it is a different base. I think Troggoth Princess was an oval base. This is a circular base. I'm sure you could rebase it, and I'm sure most TOs would not care at all. One question I have for you, Dom, before we kind of move on, because I've got this context, but then you alluded to the fact that in this army of Renown, you can pass on some of these benefits to the other Trogs. But before we get to that, I want to ask you, because you didn't talk about it, Glyph of Hysh. Now, I, as a King's Gitz, Bad Snatchers, I got CP coming out the wazoo. Scraggy gives me a free CP. My Fungoid Cave Shaman on a 4+ gives me a CP. If I go second in the battle round, I can choose a CP. There's so many things that are giving me CP. Would you find yourself in most situations the value of the Glyph of Hysh, or Are you going the ward? Are you going the +1 attack? Are you going for the +1 rend?
Yeah, I'd probably argue that unless you're playing an opponent who has 0 shooting, Glyph of Hiss would probably be my like second least favorite choice outside of obviously taking mortal wounds to yourself. And I think that the reason for that is because, I mean, you've alluded to it. It's the fact that you get so much CP anyways. But I think more, probably even more so, you know, unless you've got an ability to do a CP at multiple places, like you've took Speak Your Skill Fetish in the Trog list, I just wonder how much CP you're going to be spending on him anyways, because he's typically going to be, I picture him like behind your army. So you're not really going to be auto running him 6. You might all out defensive if someone's trying to shoot him, but you're probably all out defense and all out attacking the stuff in front of him for 3 or 4 battle rounds before he actually gets in. So even that put me off because it specifically talks about receiving a command. If it was him issuing it, I would feel differently about it, and I'm just going to get him to issue all my commands and just keep getting them back. But because it's receiving, I just wonder. I think you'll go battle rounds and get no benefit from this, if I'm honest. Which is why I would always put that as after obviously taking D3 mortal wounds. That's probably the one I'd go for the least. Yeah.
Cool. That was what I was thinking. I was thinking purely, though, as a Trog player, do you have as many CP as I get as a traditional Grot player? And the answer is no. I get way more than you would. But yeah. I don't see a lot of value in that. Obviously, the Glyph of Ulgu is situational and can be really great if you're moving into Slaanesh, if you're going into KO. Being able to stop them from shooting you unless they roll an unmodified 6 is very powerful. But on the flip side, the ward, the +1 attack or +1 rend is just where I'm at, let alone the fact you get to do the healing and stuff. But I think 320 points is a fair price, to be honest. I think maybe a little undercosted, but when I looked at the points, I thought, you know what, that's something I can put into my list, and it doesn't ruin my build too much.
No, I agree. Yeah, I think you can swap out in the Trog list. You can swap out a Dan called Trog Boss for him, and then just drop one other thing from your list, or you can put him in with a Dan called Trog Boss, which is what I've sort of been exploring, and possibly have 2 monsters if you have the right track. I think 320 is fine. I think the only disappointment I've got with it, and I think others have, is that he just doesn't buff more stuff in your army. I would have loved that. Maybe just one more rule that buff things outside of Truggs Troggherd, which I know we're going to come on to. Would have been really nice, I think. But no, I think he's great. I'm definitely going to be trying him. Yeah.
Cool. So everyone, context King's Git. So the King of Gits, the Trog King, so king of everything. Scraggroth Balloon King, Troggoth King. Everyone's a king here. All right. The context on this war scroll, because the next conversation is about to be about this army of renown. So you can supercharge Trog and the benefits. So what we've talked about so far is purely if you put the king into any list. So I can put it into my Bad Snatchers, I can put it into Jaws of Mork, and this stuff is still working as we have discussed. So just I want that frame of reference here. So if I like my king, my Troggoth king, there is this new army of renown, and it's called Truggs Troggherd. Truggs Troggherd. It's late on a Sunday, folks. Leave me be. Now, read the rule at the top, and it's very specific. So when you pick this Gloomspites Gitz army, it is an army of renown. And what it basically means, to summarize this, is that every unit in a Truggs Troggherd must have the keyword Troggoth. That's a really important rule to know. So it means no squigs, no scraggrot, no grots and stabbers, no spiders. Everything has to be your Fellwater, your Dankhold, your Rock Guts. That is your army. Also, and you'll notice that the moon is a little different. Not the way the moon works, but you'll notice that the other stuff that you get from the allegiance ability, so the 4-up rally, the run and charge, that stuff is completely gone when it comes to the Troggherd. But Dom, is there something new on this screen?
There is indeed, yeah. There's two. I mean, I guess there's 2 new things, I guess, on the screen that we didn't have before. The first one is that, and probably what I'm probably most excited about actually is the fact that in this sub factions, I think we're going to refer to it as, all of your Troggoth units gain the battle line roll. So what that means is the Dankhold Troggoth, which I'm sure we'll come on to talk about in the moment. So not the Trog boss. They become battle line, which is great. and that opens up some really interesting grand strategies, which I'm sure we'll come on to. But the other thing, which is super exciting, given the mind bearing in mind what we just spoke about with Trug, is that when you use his Laystone ability at the start of your hero phase, it actually impacts all of the Trogs in your army. It impacts your whole army, right? Because your whole army is Trogs. So whatever you roll on that Laystone is going to impact everyone, which is actually incredibly powerful when you think about some of the units that are available in Trogs.
Though it does create a very unique challenge, because if I take the Glyph of Shimon, it actually doesn't have nearly as much benefit to my Trogs as opposed to getting the +1 attack, improve the rend, or you can only shoot me if you roll an unmodified 6 to hit.
Yeah, definitely, and I suppose it'll depend on the sort of the build you go for. I mean, if having your whole army only being able to hit on 6s against like a KO or a Slanesh player is insane, to be honest. It's borderline impossible to shift, I think. Although there are some more KO melee builds floating around now, but certainly the old sort of Thunderer builds that are still lurking around. And the 5-up ward, I think if you're running sort of Fell Waters and Dankhold Troggoths and the Dankhold Trog boss, that's where I see insane value, especially on the Fell Waters. I played a practice game with Truggs Troggherd last week against a friend on TTS, to see how it played, and I got the 5-up ward off for a turn, and the Fell Waters and the Dankholds just would not go anywhere. And then sort of the -1 to hit from the Fells plus a 3-up save because the Moon, 5-up ward, they were brilliant. So yeah, there's some really interesting sort of combinations you can put together from Trogs now thanks to this.
And it's probably a really good call out as well, is that you can tap into the durability of a Rock Gut by getting the 5-up ward on a Fell Water, and that alone might bring some very different style, because traditionally you wouldn't see too many Fell Waters, but you could actually build around Fell Waters if you know that you're going for the 5-up ward. So, and then obviously all the benefits, as you said, the +1 to the save under Light of the Bad Moon. You would obviously get the subtract 1 from hit rolls if you're within 3 inches of the terrible stench of the Fell Water. And then there's obviously the Noxious Vomit, which would then, have some negative impacts to the opponent's rend or the armor save. So does make you think a little bit like, how do I best build around this? And is it still Rock Guts, Dom, or has this alone made you think a little differently around the Dankhold or the Fell Waters?
It's made me think about it really differently, to be honest. It's risky, of course, because it's 4 dice, right? And if you don't get that ward, then your Fell Waters and your Dankholds don't have that sort of durability. But even without it, I think you can handle that, because I think you can protect your sort of Dankholds behind the Fell Waters, and even charging into 3 Fell Waters with no 5-up ward. If you take an Unleash Hell and you get that -1 save and your -1 to hit, and then having Dankhold Troggoths fight over the top of the Fell Waters that maybe you kill, you're not going to survive sort of a double Dankhold Troggoth hit back. So I think even without getting the 5-up ward, I feel like the Fell Waters and the Dankhold still have really great value in this Trugg Troggherd list. I think in most of the lists I've been building, I've actually only been taking 1 unit of Rocket Troggoths now, and just really leaning into a generally like 4-up, basically a 3-up save army with a few -1 to hit debuffs and either incredible attack volume or really high rend, or hopefully that 5-up ward, and just everything is so survivable that it's really hard for your opponent to not have to focus 1 unit down at a time. So yeah, I've actually been moving away from Rockets, interestingly, in the Truggs Troggherd build.
Something we didn't talk about, and I wish I actually acknowledged it earlier in the discussion, is one of the good quality of life changes that's happened for you is the coherency change as well. So that's obviously not locked to the Troggherd. This is just universally, and I'm so glad for units like yours that you want to run that unit of 6 Rock Guts, but it had that weird coherency rule, and it was super annoying because you were 6, not 5. Now that we've gone it to 6, has that improved whether you play, whether you're thinking about reinforcing, or even not double reinforcing, but has it actually changed the way that you build or even play with the new coherency rules?
Yeah, big time. Yeah, I don't think I realized how much of an impact it would actually have until I started playing it. I played a tournament the weekend after that change came out. And instantly, I think within my first game, I saw the impact. Where I found it really useful is because you're not typically using rockets as a screen. You could because they're really durable, but I tend to want them fully fresh for the hit back, and then they'll take an impact hit later on in the game. But you can like wrap them around 3 fell waters, or you can wrap them around the Dawnbringers Troggoth. So if someone comes into them and they're wrapped around 3 fell waters as a 6, it's brilliant because there's nowhere they can go to not be -1 to hit. There's nowhere they can go to not take an Unleash Hell. A fell water Unleash Hell can completely just destroy a unit if you get that -1 save through, and then do a few chip D3 mortals as well. And you've got rock guts hitting your back at effective -3 Ren that you can't auto defense because you've got the vomits gone off, and then equally being able to put a Dawnbringers Troggoth in the middle of 6 of them. It just gives that extra punch, and it's just another like put off for your opponent. And I found it super. There has been times when I've used them more of a screen, like you can now use them to like effectively screen off the entirety of a front of an objective, which was much harder before. So maybe as you get later into the game and you're starting to just play for points. But yeah, it's brilliant, and also it obviously they can pretty much fight in 2 ranks with a 2-inch reach. You obviously got to fiddle a little bit at the ends, but it just gets rid of that as well. Like just if they're faffing around, they're trying to squeeze everyone in, you can just wrap stuff. Yeah, it's brilliant. Great change.
Yeah, it's such a good change. But then on the negative side, I want to ask you, what's the trade-off here? Because you can't get all the cool stuff, right? Yeah, you keep your +1 to your save under Light of the Bad Moon. Yeah, your units that don't have the hero keyword can become Battle Line, which is super neat. You've obviously also got the malfunctioning Laystone. And I was just looking at like the +1 attack or the +1 rend. I'm like, right, Rock Guts go to 3 attacks each. Or you could go to Rend -3 for 3 damage. That's brutal. That's some big hitting units for 170 points for 3.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think that the trade off, I guess, with this is, and I think the other issue is, interestingly, a lot of the buffs that are on Trugg's War Scroll from his Laystone, you can get from elsewhere in the Gitz book. So you can get the +1 attack from the Spore Splatters without having to roll the dice. You can get a 5-up ward if you really wanted it from the Snufflers. You can get an extra Ren from the Gobbapalooza. That's 1 unit specific. You can take Mommet and give out -1 save, which is effectively an extra Rens. So you do lose quite a bit by going in Truggs Troggherd, and obviously screens as well. You're relying on sort of smaller screens that maybe cover less area. So there's definitely a weighing up exercise to be had. Like, are you better off just taking these smaller units and getting effectively the same buffs without having to roll the dice? But I think if you're again, like, I think Truggs Troggherd, like if you're a big Trog enthusiast like me and like you want to go to like a 1-day or just do a pickup game with friends, and you sort of have a mission where you're not going to have to massively spread out on 6 objectives, it'll put in some serious work, I think, and just be great fun as well, and quite easy to play, I think, which is nice because your hero phase is nice and short. Roll 4 dice, buff your whole army, and then shuffle up. So yeah,
I think my initial concern, and you can tell me if it's a real concern or not, is you lose access really to wizards. I feel like that's the one big gap with a pure troll list. Is Scragrot gives you a lot of benefit being a source of the bad moon. So for you, obviously, if you +1 save, you said, being able to deny someone doing mystical dominance, magical dominance, and getting that +1 to your save, playing with Hoarfrost or Merciless Blizzard, those spells, or even things like Itchy Nuisance, even things like Sneaky Distraction. I feel like, and I don't know this because I'm not a full Trog player, so this is why I need you to kind of tell me if it's a real thing. But for me, I really value the Gobbapalooza, the spells that come out. I really value having Hoarfrost or Blizzard. I really value Scraggy's. The amount of times I've gotten out of trouble because of Scraggy's Fangs at a Bad Moon spell, and I put those Primal Magic dice just to get the spell off, not to increase. Obviously, I can't increase. Yeah. But it's gotten me out of trouble so much with certain armies, or got me out of combat that's allowed me to move forward and get into and smash. Is it such of a big thing like I'm freaking out about, or is it actually a genuine reason why you might not do the Troggherd?
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking about like building a competitive list, 100%, it's a big thing. I mean, itchy nuisance in itself is phenomenal in the Trog list. Having the ability to fight on two fronts before being hit back with itchy nuisance, which makes one unit fight last, is great. Like, although Trogs are durable, like they will die. There's so much damage in the game these days, like they are going to die. And once you start losing one or two, they're only 2 attacks each. Like the output does start coming down, and you can't ride them on the 4-up like you can with your Moon Clan units. So like having those cheap throwaway screens is super helpful as well. And obviously you don't really have that in Truggs Troggherd. And I think it just becomes like a completely different list archetype. It just becomes a slow moving, durable, hard hitting castle, but there's not much more to it. So you also will probably lose a bit of the shenanigans and the techie play that I think the Gitz list, and I think a lot of the players actually who play Gitz love. And yeah, like there's so many spells in the book that we could go through that you'd lose. Like you've mentioned Mesmerize and OCP one. There's -1 to hit bubble is great because that pretty much makes up if you don't have Fell Waters in your list. There's like Nick It, which occasionally if you're running Scrag Rock will be super situational, but if you've got that chance to just back yourself through all the 10 up, it can be really great. So
well, the spell we didn't talk about and has gotten me out of trouble a few times is Hand of Gork.
Hand of Gork,
so,
of course.
Like not being able to teleport around the board, or coming back from the shrine. Like, how do I get back into the fight? I'm teleporting with those Hand of Gork. So
yeah.
I think that's the kind of thing I want to warn you folks about. Is that do I like these rules? And there's a few more things for me to show you. Do I like them? Yes. Is it worth the trade-off by not getting anything that's a Troggoth? You need to decide. For me personally, I value the other things probably more than this, but I certainly would take the Troggoth King in another build.
Yeah, no, I'm totally aligned with you on that. I would definitely be taking personally. Again, it's everyone's decision. I wouldn't be taking Truggs Troggherd to like a competitive event, or like even probably a 2-day. I think it'll be a very proper slog. I think, especially matchup dependent. But yeah, I think you could have a pickup game against friends and probably have a great time with it. Still, so yeah.
Oh, yeah, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just I think the trade-off is not worth it for me. But as I mentioned, you do get other things, and there are specific command traits, artifacts, battle tactics, and a grand strategy for this. So you couldn't use the battle tactics in the Gitz book. You can still use the one from General's Handbook, but it's just you can't use your book ability. So you can't choose Chase the Moon, Follow the Moon, Chase the Moon. You can't use, Moonface Mommet or Glowy Howzit. You can only use the ones on the screen here if you choose the Army of Renown. So of the 3 command traits, and what's really cool as well is that you can actually issue it to a unique hero as well, which is super fascinating. So if the Trog King is the only hero you have in your list, usually unique heroes you can't put a command trait on, you absolutely can in this particular build. So of the 3, do you have a favorite, and why would it be your favorite?
Yeah, comfortably prized Troglet for me. I think the second one on the list. I think partially driven by, I think the other 2 aren't that great, really. I think the healing one, just getting an extra +1, like it's okay, but you're typically healing 2 or 3 times before you get hit again anyways, because you heal every hero phase now. There are only 4 wound models. Your Trog bosses are healing on D6. He's healing D3+3. I feel that extra 1 feels a bit of a big... Is not much value for like a command trait for something that can be quite impactful. It would probably never take that. Living Landmark's like okay. If it wasn't first movement phase, I'd be more tempted. Maybe if you could wait till like the 3rd turn and deep strike a Trog boss or something behind your opponent's lines and get stuck in. But not super keen on those 2. But which naturally pushes me towards prize Troglet. But I also think just generally the ability to switch off a CP being spent on a 5+ is good. It's a good little ability. It's a shame it's only issues, because people could obviously keep like totems well behind the front line and issue it, and you can't switch it off because it's not about the unit that receives it. That is a bit of a shame. But because Trogs are a castle army, you want to get stuck in. Trug's going to be quite far forward in these Trugg Troggherd builds. He's going to be in the fight because you don't have loads of models, and it's quite nice to be able to stop an inspiring presence or a all-out defense or anything else, or a redeploy as well when you've got a slow-moving army. it is really helpful. It's just a shame that it's only issues. I really wish it was issues out or receives, because there's quite a lot of ways to play around this. But yeah, Prize Troggoth for me is the standout winner.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. If living landmark, so living landmark is basically you can come on from a terrain feature outside of 9 inches from an enemy within 3 inches of that terrain feature. If it was like you and one unit, so if you could deep strike a unit with you, whether it was some fell waters, whether it was some dank holds, hell, if it was just your dank hold, if it was not your Trog boss, your regular one. That would probably be more attractive to me. But like, do I need to teleport my general and be completely away, as you said, my castle? No, I don't need this. I don't need that rule. And yeah, I think Prize Troglodyte's probably the one for me.
Yeah, definitely.
What about the artifacts? We've kept the Loonstone Teeth, and I have a follow-up question about that particular artifact. And the other one being, there's obviously the Crunchy Shinnies, which is gives you the bearer the movement characteristic of D6+5, which is kind of nice. Or the subtract 1 from hit rolls and wound rolls that when you target the bearer to fight.
Yeah, again, there's a standout winner for me from this one. And I think, look, I would personally take Loonstone Teeth in these builds, and I'd probably be putting it on a Dankled Trog boss, just because then you've got a couple of monsters on the boards. That's 10 on objectives. You've got roars, stomps, Titanic Jewels if you're up against another monster. I quite like that. It's quite handy. I do think, though, there's an argument that maybe you would go with Arcane Tome just to open up a battle tactic and maybe chuck that onto the Dankled Trog boss, because I believe you can take those artifacts. You just can't take the ones from the Gitz book.
Correct. You can do the universal stuff. You can't just take the Gitz. It's specific to the Gitz.
Yeah, and also you get a Mystic Shield then, which is always nice in the Trog list. You get a Dispel. You can play with Primals without having to use the action. That's probably the one I'd probably start taking, having played this now. But then when you look at the other ones, like Crunchy Shinnies, like D6+5, again, it's nice to have a bit of a quicker Trog boss, but just knowing how the army plays as an archetype, it is like a castle. You do want stuff to stay together, and you sort of spending an artifact. If you roll a 1, he hasn't actually moved any further. If you roll a 2, he's moved 1 inch further. You could be bringing an artifact which is barely having any benefit to him across the game. And then the club, I won't even try and say the first part of it, Thwackweezer, I think is what they've gone for.
Yeah, the
Thwackweezer club. I think, again, like this is, if you could put this on Trug, I think I'd be all over that. I'd be pushing him in. I'd be fighting first with him every time, and I'd just be jamming people in there with a 3-up, 5-up ward monster that's subtracting 1 from hit and wound rolls. But because you can only put it on the Dankled Trog boss, who isn't as killy, he's not as durable. I think Loonstone Teeth is what, if I was choosing from this list, I would take.
So, friend of the channel, Stuart Hodges, you know who you are. Question that actually ties quite nicely into this Loonstone Teeth. And so Stu's question is, do you think the Truggs, this strap in is a long statement. Do you think the Truggs Troggherd is a prelude to 4th edition, in that some of the rules may be an indication of things to come? I.e., the Loonstone Teeth artifact. The bearer gets the monster keyword, but if it's already a monster, it can carry out 2 monstrous rampages rather than 1. Troggs don't have a monster keyword other than Trug, and it states that you can't give an artifact to unique. So the command trait we can, artifacts we can't. So do you think this is a future indication that Troggs get a monster keyword, or maybe we get the Troggoth princess come back in plastic? Or do you think this is kind of alluding to something that maybe isn't out yet, or for 4th edition?
Yeah, it's a great spot, actually. Yeah, and I remember when I read this, I was confused as to why that, like, because there is no monster in Gitz in Truggs Troggherd, in Trolls, that you can put this on and have benefit, because it can't go on Trug, and it doesn't feel like they've made a mistake with it not being able to go on him, because that seems quite clearly said only command traits. So yeah, I'm assuming that well, if you want my guess, I'd be guessing that maybe Dankled Trog bosses are going to become monsters. I mean, I think every Gitz player in the world's only been calling out for it for about 5 years. And I think the question I'm asked the most when I play Troggs is how many monsters do you have? When people look across the board, and I'm typically like, I don't actually have any. And they're like, what? They're not monsters? And I'm like, no, they're not monsters. So it'll be nice to be able to answer that question with 2 or 3 in the future. And then similarly, yeah, I wonder if there almost certainly will be, I'm sure, some more sort of monsters, Troggs coming out if Truggs anything to go by. So yeah, I think there's definitely some things we can draw from that.
I would agree. I don't think that's a mistake like the Gargant's, the new Gargant Army of Renown's grand strategy. That's clearly a mistake.
Yeah.
That seems intentional. So yeah, maybe there is something in there. Stu, good call out. Shout out there. Speaking of grand strats, you do not have the traditional ones. So we talked about it. You know, Chase the Moon is one of the most popular ones for Gitz. But you do have a new one, which is called Leave Me Alone. That sings dear to my heart. When the battle ends, you complete this grand strategy if a friendly Trug is on the battlefield and no enemy heroes are on the battlefield. So keep your Trug alive, and you've got to have a Trug and no enemy heroes. Do you like this, or would you go to your General's Handbook if you were playing the Troggherd?
I think it's too easy to stop. I think I reckon I would probably go Overshadow, personally from the GHB, which is keep your battle line alive and kill all your opponents, because you in Truggs Troggherd, pretty much your whole army is going to be battle line, apart from a couple of heroes, the 2 or 3 heroes that I think you'll maybe see in some of these lists. So it's going to be. Yeah, I think if you've lost all your battle line, and people's battle line these days are typically screens that are up front. Obviously, there's some armies like Gargoths and stuff where that's not the case, but you're generally going to be getting stuck into people's battle lines. And I feel like you can control that much more than this one. I feel like this is very easy for your opponent to stop without having to sacrifice their game plan. Just keep a hero at the back of the board, and suddenly you're just not going to get 3 points because you're quite a slow-moving army. You don't have that spell threat projection we've spoken about. You don't have squigs. You just simply would just never get there. Whereas if you choose Overshadow, if someone is backboarding the battle line, they're probably giving something up, whether it's a screen, a bit of output, and you don't hit that. Like if they're stopping you scoring 3 points, they're also compromising something in this build as well. So I would probably leave this alone, to be honest, and go with Overshadow.
Yeah, I would agree. How do I pull down that Archaon? How do I pull down that Special K, Catacross that's hiding behind Immortus Guard? How do I get to that Warsong Revenant hiding in the trees of Sylvaneth? How do I get to that spellcasting Savant that's running away, kind of trying to hide? And I think you're right. I think this is a risky play, and there's probably more heroes on the board than there ever has been before with a lot of these Antorian Locuses too. I think, yeah. And obviously the changes to Lookout Serfs, if they're hiding between battle line, they can't even be picked as a target. You don't have any area of effect kind of ranges. So it's a risky one.
Yeah, totally agree. I think as well, weirdly, the change to Blizzard has helped us even less, because you're going to have less people teleporting heroes out 9 inches in front of your army. So they're all going to be at the back of the board now, just waiting for you to come to them and shoot you over the top of your screens, probably. So yeah, I think it's too hard. It also just doesn't really fit with the list archetype. So yeah, whereas Overshadow, I think, just allows you to just play a natural game, and you'll probably be able to try and achieve it without having to go too much off course.
Yeah. What about your battle tactics? There's 3 battle tactics, so I'll read them out for the folks who are listening. So don't like that one. Pick one enemy hero. You complete the tactic if that hero was destroyed during this turn by an attack made by a friendly Trug. Thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's all right. I think of the 3, it's the hardest one. But I'd be surprised if at some point during the game there wasn't an opportunity to kill a hero with Trug. So I don't hate that at all. It's a situational one, but it'll be one where when the opportunity arises, you'll have an easy choice. You'll have a 5 wound hero nearby. Trug's going to kill that. I can get to it and hopefully fight other stuff. So yeah, I don't hate that at all. It'll probably be like a turn 3, 4, 5 one.
It's kind of like reprisal. Like when it happens, you take advantage. I guess what works for you as well is all of your attacks, the Iron Shell Club and the Mighty Antlers, are both range 3. So there's a good chance that you're going to be able to, from your pile-in or clearing some screens, get to that hero, pop down the finest hour, or it's Trugg's birthday, and just go for that battle tactic. I think that one is situational, but there's probably going to be that chance, you're right, that he's going to be fighting at least one hero.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Feels funny. You complete the battle tactic if a friendly Truggs Troggherd unit destroys an enemy unit during this turn while it was affected by the aura of the Haywire magic battle trait. So that is when Trug does his little laystone, and then everyone gets the benefit.
Yeah, I think it's really good. Yeah, I mean, we'll talk about the third one in a minute as well. But yeah, I think the tactics here are strong, to be honest. I think obviously you maybe do this earlier on in the game because you don't want to be risking Trug not being there, or you only having like one dice and you're rolling a one or something disastrous like that happening. But yeah, I think it's really good. Like, you're a Trog army, you want to be fighting. Most stuff you touch will die pretty much. You don't have to nominate the unit, which is always brilliant, and you don't even have to nominate the enemy unit. So essentially, I don't even think you have to think that much about this. You can just play your turn. You're probably going to kill something. You've hopefully haven't forgotten to activate your Laystone. If you have, I'd like to think your opponent and let you go back and do it, because it's basically the reason you've brought the army. So I think it's great. Just play the game. It's basically what it's asking you to do.
It's a turn 2 or a turn 3. I think like turn 2 or turn 3 for me, as you said, while Trug's on the board, while you've got maximum Laystone dice, pop that rend -1 or +1 attack. Just go in there. And even if there's a squishy battle line unit, just keep up your 5-up ward and just go in. And I think that's very easily achieved. Good call outs as well. You don't have to pick him in advance, so your opponent can't respond with like a finest hour or not a retreat. What am I trying to say? Like a redeploy. That's the word I was looking. That's the word I was looking for. What's that glowy thing? Pick one objective you do not control. You complete this tactic if you control that objective at the end of this turn, and 2 or more friendly Truggs Troggherd units that are affected by the light of the bad moon are contesting that objective. So it's kind of like Follow the Moon, just a little bit more restrictive. But what are your thoughts?
Yeah, another one that I really like. It's another one where you just play the game, basically. As a Trog player, like in AOS, you're going to be taking objectives off your opponent. That tends to be how the game goes. It swings. You control more, then they control more, and eventually get to a state where someone's not able to do that. And yeah, so it's just asking you to go on the objective. You're a castle army, so you're going to have units bunched together. So the 2 units isn't a problem. The only watch out is the bad moon. Like, if the moon's in the middle of the board, like just go for it then, and just don't risk wait. And if it's in the bottom corner and it hasn't moved yet, because maybe you've rolled a few 1-3s, like, don't be afraid to go for it early if it's covering an objective. Just don't leave it late when the moon disappears into the top corner and your Trogs are all stuck down here, because this is an easy one, but you've just got to be smart with when you pick it. But yeah, it's a turn like, maybe 1 if you've given the turn away, or turn 2. If like, your opponents came and you've like maybe the magical dominance turn 1 or something like that, and then turn 2 you've stepped on the objective. So yeah, I think it's a turn 1 or a turn 2, I think.
Yeah, I feel like it's a turn 2 and beyond. Actually, I think it probably is turn 2, because you'd like to think that the bad moon moves. Although pick an objective you don't control. So even if you deployed, let's say there's an objective in my territory, and the bad moon, like the Loon Shrine, for example, is near it, or it's in the quadrant. If I don't deploy on that objective, and then in turn 1 I move onto the objective, then I score it. Right? Because it's under the light of the bad moon. I didn't have it in deployment, but I do now in turn 1.
Spot on. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and even if like the moon starts in one corner, there's probably going to be some objectives there that you can just go and tow. So it does open up quite an interesting, like, easy turn 1 tactic. Yeah, but I do agree with you. I would only do it if I was like, say you're against like Seraphon or like Soulbright, and you've taken the Arcane Tome that I mentioned, and then the risk of the cast and spell one just isn't worth it, because you want to get ahead of them on those armies as soon as possible, because Seraphon have board-wide unbinds and Soulbright can teleport heroes. They can just teleport themselves into dispel range. This could be a really nice one. Like I say, to just start off objectives. Think about, you could either take the first turn because you're going to be low drop, which we'll come on to soon, or even if you give it away, I think there'll be opportunities to do this turn one against a few armies, but typically definitely wait, because it'll present itself at some point, definitely. So yeah.
Yeah, it's good. You got a couple of options, which is neat.
Yeah.
But overall, look, there's a couple of good options here if you're going down this route. The alternative really is that, okay, cool. So that is the Truggs Troggherd, the sub-faction. I'm calling it a sub-faction. It's an army of Renown, but it's essentially a sub-faction. If you don't choose that because you think it's too restrictive or you don't like the benefits, we still do have King's Gitz, the Grim Scuttle, the Bad Snatchers, Glog's Mega Mob, and Jaws of Mork. The rules are still the same, especially your Moonlight Hide. You still get your +1 to your save. The benefit is going to be, one, you can obviously get units outside of Troggoths, which is going to be neat. You're not going to get that Laystone benefit where everyone gets the benefit. It's only purely going to be Trug. But you do obviously get your Wade and Smash, which is obviously a Trog rule, as well as if you do kind of go into the Squigs or the Gits, the Grots or the Spiders, there are other stuff. There's Monstrous Rampages or Heroic Actions. I will ask you, as a Trog man, do you find yourself using Wade and Smash often, or is it something that you'd prefer to go for the CP or the Finest Hour or whatever?
I found myself using Wade and Smash late games when it's really tight and I have to really lean into to try and get a point ahead and try and deny a battle tactic. And because it's super effective in the right situation. If late game, if you're really neck and neck with someone, you can send your Trog boss in top of turn 4, for example. And then almost know that just keep them in combat with something. And when your opponent chooses a tactic or maybe has a crucial hero, you can then move them into them to try and stop a tactic or steal an objective. I've used it a few times, but typically I'm going for this CP. To be honest with you, more often than not.
Interesting.
Yeah.
No, sorry. I'm finding myself interesting. Sorry, Dom.
Yeah.
I had this little thought. I'm like, I wonder if Trug is a dank hold Trog boss. And I just looked at the war scroll. He's absolutely a dank hold Trog boss.
He can wait and smash.
He can wait and smash with those high rend, high damage attacks, and that unlocks a few interesting little things I hadn't really thought about in my army, because I'm like, at the moment, because I've been playing with the Mega Gargant, I'm like, do I swap in the Trug with some Rock Guts in place for the Mega Gargant? And biting in the hero phase, that obviously stopped me from using my Moon Clan Rally, and being able to do it 3 times is powerful. But now that Rally has been changed to regenerate a maximum of 10 wounds, it's actually not that valuable. I don't need it 3 times. I still need the Light of the Bad Moon to get the 4 up, but to do it 3 times, it actually isn't that valuable in most situations for me. So, Wade Smash, that's not too bad with Trug.
Yeah, it can really shut stuff down. It really shuts stuff down. That's how I typically use it. Because unfortunately you don't get a fight with your profile or anything like that. It's just a 2-up D3 mortal wounds, but you can really tag stuff up. That's where I've loved it. And yeah, if you're pushing that big base 6 inches and tagging loads of stuff up, that can completely change its whole turn for an opponent. A bit like Murderlust, which we've spoken about. It's really effective. I really like Wade and Smash. Just situational, I found.
So that's where I was going to go with that, because you're right. I don't get to do my melee profile. It's not like Marathi where I can fight in the hero phase with my profile. Yeah. But what it does do is I can charge into combat, do a bunch of damage. If I do happen to get pinned with that 1 or 2 wound left, and I don't want to retreat and I want to keep moving forward, and I don't want to waste a shooting attack or a spell just to kind of clip that unit that is 1 or extra 2 wounds, that's a nice way to kind of free myself up and then keep kind of charging. So, it's obviously not the whole profile, and I don't get all my rend attacks and all the good damage, but it does allow me to free myself up for then following combat phase to do it.
Definitely, one of the other ways I've used this before, and this is incredibly situational. I've used it this way twice. If he's tagged in combat with something, the important thing is it says that he just has to finish within 3 of it. So if he's like base to base with something, so a good example is I was playing an incarnate where I knew I couldn't retreat, so he was stuck. And then what I did was I weighed and smashed him to the tip of 3 inches away from the incarnate. So he was still in combat with it. He just moved away from it, kept 3 inches. And then what that meant was I could then charge some rock guts in front of him. So I then charged the rock guts in front of him in the gap he just created with the weighed and smash. So then the incarnate could only get, I could come if it couldn't get him at all, or it could only get him a 1 weapon profile. But it also meant I could then wrap the incarnate with 6 rock guts rather than having like a tiny little area. So you can be really clever with it as well, and like get him out of situations he doesn't want to be in. I'll get an extra 6-inch movement if you've got the turn to then go and stand on the objective later on and when you retreat. So yeah, situational. But if there's an option to do it, I'm typically doing it to do to get some sort of benefit from it. Because like you say, back in the Lunatic Hordes is great. But I mean, I'm talking about Troggoths. There's probably only 2 units that I'm ever typically rallying on the 4+ anyways, which is the Stabbers and the Gobapalooza. So yeah, it's a good little command. Good little heroic action.
Yeah. Do you like shooters? Like, I'm starting to lean towards shooters as well, especially for like my unit of 20, because especially if I've got like a Gobapalooza, put a Ren -1 on them. If there's over 10, they get 2 shots. It could be 40, hitting on 4s, wounding on 5s, but being able to just chip away at that screen, again, get myself out of combat, go for broke and just try to chip out that 5 wound idiot, hitting on 5s, wounding on 5s because you're the lookout, sir. I don't mind that particular war scroll. Obviously, if I want to reinforce it, I'm going Stabbers every day.
Yeah, no, I don't hit shooters at all. Yeah, and it's interesting actually because they can spike. Like if you all out attack them, and like you say, and you put the Palooza -1 rend on them, you could lift like a 10-man skink unit or something like that if things go really well. But yeah, I think I typically run Stabbers just because of my list, just the way I play my list, and I really want just that +1 save against shooting, and then that extra save characteristic in combat. You can get them on 4+. It's like a Mystic Shield. I really like it because it just keeps my Trogs safer for longer. So
I tell you what I've really enjoyed lately: the being able to contest objectives within 9 inches as opposed to 6 when you have 20 or more Stabbers. So being able to contest, or even going for something where what's the battle plan where if you hold it for 2 times in a row, is it not Nexus?
Limited resources.
Limited resources, that's the one. Like I can give it away because I've only got 1 idiot within 9. Someone moves onto it, cool, and then I can get it back pretty easily. And I can still do it without even being in combat if I need to. So
yeah, it's a phenomenal ability. When you pair that with a teleport as well, it's great for stealing back objectives, I find, because and again, the registered unit that rallies on a 4 comes back from the shrine, so you can really just throw them into situations where you wouldn't want some of your stronger units just to steal a back objective on things like limited resources, where you want to be trying to take your opponent's home ones as early as possible. So then late game, you can then just stay on your own. So yeah, that I do really like that. I do just run them as block of 20, so I'll lose that tech quite quickly. But it has great use turn 1, I find, just to not have to unpack too much.
Even turn 1, it can become super valuable.
Yeah.
What's your favorite command trait for the Trogs? I'm not going to go into the other side. It's all super situational. But if you're not going the Army of Renown, what's your favorite command trait and why?
So now I take Alpha Trog. When I first started as GHB, and probably all GHB, I was running Loon Skin because it's hard to argue with the ability to get a free end the spell. But I've run Alpha Trog a couple of times, and it's given my list some things that it didn't previously have. So it keeps people honest with terrain pieces. So if you think about like the Gitz mirror match, they can't just be dumping their shrine in the front line because you've got a monster now who could go up there and try and smash it. Of other armies like Khorne, for example, you might want to get a hold of that altar so they can't summon from it. But then the ability to just slide again a unit onto an objective and have it count as 5. That's got me over the line a few times in an army that typically doesn't have great objective control Trogs. And then access to raw as well is absolutely brilliant. If you've got that Kragnos or that Archeon or whatever, and you just really need to try and get through that save, just getting that raw off, and then that just stacks with all of your rounds. So, and then +2 your wound characteristic. Your grand strategy is typically to keep your general alive, chasing the moon. So have them under the moon for 3 turns to keep them alive. +2 wounds. You're not going to grumble at that either. So I'm very much in the alpha Trog camp now when it comes to Trogs.
Yeah, it's always been my favorite. Just the sheer, you get a free endless spell, and that could be the equivalent value of 80 to 100 points, right? But you don't have a lot of good casting, right? So it'll be coming down super easy. So for me, it's always been the +2 to wounds. It's obviously getting the monster keyword, unlocking Raw Storm, Titanic Jewel, Smash to Rubble. Even keeping it around, making it easier for you to kind of like heal back up because you didn't die. Like there's too much that comes from Alpha Trog. If it was 1 wound, wouldn't care. 2 wounds and the monster is enough to kind of get me interested.
Definitely, yeah. I think as well, Loonskin for me felt like its value went down with the addition of Primal Dice, which might be a weird thing to say, but Scuttletide is a brilliant spell. But it's easy to dispel now because of Primal Dice. That's the problem. Before you had to get an 8 to get rid of it, or maybe a 9 if you had the right unit around. And having just that endless spell that could just move block, could do so many mortal wounds to people on the objective if you put it in the right position. But people can just get rid of it now with Primal Dice, and they always will in their turn because it's such a nuisance. So Primal Dice is what really pushed me away from Loonskin and made me think there's not as much value in Scuttletide now.
Scuttletide used to be really annoying against me, and it reminds me a lot when I played against it last. It was really annoying because it was summoned from a spider wizard. So having the Arachnarok spider following it, giving it +1. So really, it was making me to go an unbind of 9. That was really pushing it pretty hard, right? But now it's like 1, as a Trog player, you're not going to have that Arachnarok wizard. 2. For me, like if I was going to pick a spell from Loonskin, it'd probably be Malevolent Moon, just because it's probably, especially because if you don't have Scragrot, and I know Scragrot went up like 70 points since we spoke last, because he was at 150, now he's 230, 210. If you don't take Scragrot, this is a great way to have another source of moon, as opposed to relying on it getting to the center of the board. So it will follow you along, or it'll keep you even when the moon kind of goes off the board.
Yeah. I think Moon's the most popular pick when you see people take Loonskin in a Trog. I mean, me and Stu, our coaches actually have spoken about this a few times. Like the reason that I typically would go into Scuttletide as well was just that ability to reach out and like touch your opponent's army turn 1, which Trogs often lack. So it keeps people honest, and at some point they're going to leave a gap behind their army, and you can get a little Scuttletide into some really important heroes, which Trogs typically struggle to do. But yeah, I've run the Moon before, and it is super helpful, especially when you don't have Scragrot, like you say, which I haven't been running Scragrot actually in my Trog lists, so it's quite useful.
I have noticed a few people kind of moving away from Scraggy, and it makes me sad. I'm a Scraggy stan. Like, I'm always all about Scraggy. But assuming you went no Scraggy, no Arcane Tome, no Wizards, you do have the access to the Nullstone Adornment. So natively, as a Trog player, you have no Wizards. Obviously, there are accesses either in Gitz or yada, yada, yada. Do you find yourself often without Wizards? And if you do, or if you had to have a list with no Wizards, is there a particular enhancement that you would choose, and what one would it be?
Yeah, so I'm always bringing Wizards this GHB, like, and Gitz are in a great place with Acolytes when you've got 65-point, Shamans who historically could cast Teleport and then do Blizzard. I mean, you still could, right? You could still try and play for a double and do it in the following turn. And at 65 points, that's a play that's probably worth it sometimes, because they could possibly win you a game. But yeah, I'm always taking them. And we spoke about some of the spells before, like Itchy Nuisance and things that you can put on a little 70-point Madcap Shaman with Moonface Momma. There's so much value in Gitz Wizards for basically no points. I never leave home without them even in a Trog list. But when I do play Fire Slayers as well, and when I've sort of thought about them, when I look at this, I think my head actually goes to probably the polished, either the polished Nullstone Pebble or the hand carved Nullstone icon. I think the issue with the hand-carved Nullstone icon is that once you probably don't have any buffs to unbinds, really. If you don't have a wizard, you're probably a non-casting army. So you've probably done your unbind first with a primal, and okay, you get a second unbind, but it's probably going to be hard to unbind it because there's so many primals floating around. Pouch of Nullstone would be great, but the tricky thing in there is that it's unmodified casting rolls. So it's not like when you add a primal in, if there's then 2 3s or 2 4s, it counts. It's only the initial roll. So like against Seraphon, I still think it would be great because at some point you're going to hope that Croak rolls a double 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 or whatever during that casting roll. But I think because it's unmodified, it just moves us slightly away from that. Whereas I think the Polished Nullstone Pebble, you can put it on like a really important hero who maybe your opponent's going to want to kill. And then try and basically like divert it. I mean, if I was running the Trog list, I'd probably go for, having said all that, I'd probably go for the icon, the Nullstone icon, just for the unbind, because you've already got a 4 spell ignore on your Trog boss, who's sort of your most important piece anyways. But yeah.
And you're probably keeping your Trog close to your rock guts anyway, so that's just making you make sure that you're outside of 3, and it's just one thing extra to remember.
Exactly.
While to your point, the getting the extra unbind and dispel would be probably helpful to you.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, or I mean, like, or even Pouch of Null Dust. It can be helpful, especially like you just want to start down that Blizzard. Like you don't care about most people's spells, but boy oh boy, when you see Blizzard come in, you want to be able to stop it. Boom, once per game. You know that they're set up because they're within 12. You know it's coming. They've got their dice to just drop it.
Yeah. It can be a big attack. For some armies, Null Dust is a nightmare.
But I think to your point as well, given that you have 65-point Web Spinner Shamans, 70-point Madcap Shamans, 110-point Fungoid Cave Shamans who generate you a CP on a 4+, and something that I've really appreciated this particular season is you can't target the Fungoid Cave Shaman outside of 12 regardless. So it doesn't rely on the Lookout Sir rules. So when I use it for like spellcasting Savant and I'm trying to avoid my wizard dying, you can't target him. You just can't target. So something that I've really appreciated.
Yeah, the outside 12 is brilliant. I always, if I've ever got 40 points left at the end, I always think I'll upgrade a Madcap Shaman to a Fungoid. That's always like my go-to if I've got 40 points lurking around. For those exact reasons. And also like spells with like 18-inch range, and things where you need line of sight. It's nice for that. Like Croak's D3 Mortal Wound one's typically 18 because you've got the guy with the banner who's giving them +6. So it is super helpful. It's just I'm more still going with Madcap Shamans because of the new Lookout Sir rule. I'm kind of like I can protect them enough anyway. So yeah.
Sorry, I was just looking at GW basically recycling names. The on the Moon Clan hero, you've got the Loonstone Teeth Caps. And I'm like, wait a second, that sounds familiar. In the Trog army of Renown, it's Loonstone Teeth. So it's just not the cap, it's just the Loonstone Teeth.
You just get squig teeth then, apparently.
there's none of that little metal thing on top of the. What's your favorite artifacts? And I'm going to open it up across the board. So obviously, with your Trogs, is there an artifact you're going to take? But we've talked a lot about bringing in some other heroes or even little wizards to kind of support us right now in the current season. I've become a real big fan of Moonface Mommed, but more importantly, I've actually really appreciated the Staff of Sneaky Steel, and that's been my number one artifact this particular season, and I will explain why in a minute. But what's yours?
Yeah, so thinking of my sort of Trog hat and Trog list hat on, I think Moonface Mommed I've taken pretty much in it basically like every list. It's a first artifact I choose from this specific list. But then also right alongside that actually is Speaky Skull Fetish. I absolutely love that artifact, the one that's in the Dan Cole Trog Boss column. A lot of people I know will take the glowy howzit on the Trog Boss because he's your general, right, and he's your grand strat. But I've found so few times I've ever lost my Trog Boss because he heals D6. He's at the back of the board. He's not typically getting stuck in combat. the things that can hurt him, like spells. You've got that 4 spell ignore. You've got ways to hide him and protect him. If your opponent's got shooting, you can Mystic Shield him. He's probably going to be a +2 save because he's next to your shrine. He's -1 to hit because he's possibly within 3 inches of a battle line or a unit of 3 or more. I just find he's so survivable. Versus, so I don't get much value from Glowy Howzit in like 90% of the games I play. Versus Speaky Skull Fetish, I find I get value from it every single game I play, every single turn I play. The ability to double Inspiring Presence is huge in a game where people are doing mortal wounds across your army. The ability to double all-out attack Trogs, where you've got +1 attack from both those all-out attacks from the Trog boss. The ability to even double rally I've used to win games before, where you pull 6 rockets back and you bring some stabbers across the front if you've rolled lucky. Like double all defense in the Trog list, we've already got pluses to save coming from the moon and things. It's an incredible artifact, and I've never looked back from Speaky Skull Fetish in my Trog list. It's absolutely brilliant, and it's not situational. You'll use it almost every single turn as well. So they're the two that I've been going for.
Yeah, even as a grot player, and there's been times where I've played with having also a dank old Trog boss and 6 rock guts. I can actually see value even in my build, which is a non-Troggoth build, getting those two. Because right now in my list, I rely on getting the Triumph in order to avoid the double battle shock. Like if I find myself in that situation, that's how I get out of it. And I'm hoping that I beat my opponent with the Triumph. But having that artifact is actually quite helpful. Now, the challenge is like, how do I get the extra artifact, right? Because Warlord's going to need 3 battalions, so 3 leaders in the slot. I need 2 that's going to be going into my Antorian locuses. So I clearly can't do Battle Regiment, and I'm going to have 5 heroes. And look, luckily we've got 65 and 70 point wizards, so that helps. But that's a good one. I actually really like that. I've become a really big fan, by the way. I did allude a little earlier to the Staff of Sneaky Stealing, because I put that on the wizard that I'm usually going to use my Primal Magic dice. So if I unbind that spell, I'm getting +1 to my casting every time I unbind the spell. So all of a sudden, I'm stacking through the game, +3, +4. If I find myself Arcane Terrain, I'm on +5. That gets me Hoarfrost, that gets me Blizzard, that gets me that critical spell like Hand of Gork or whatever spell it might be. Much more consistency.
Yeah, it's brilliant. My first tournament I took with this GHB, I had that on the Fungoid. And yeah, he was great. I was just, as soon as my opponent rolled low on the cast, I was going in with him for the unbind. I was giving him the extra unbind in the turn when you were going second as well. And yeah, incredible. I think he was on like +7 to cast by the end of one of the games, and it was just insane. I was rolling like a 3, and I was like, that's a 10. So yeah, it's a really nice one. I think if I wasn't outside some lists, I think I would definitely put that in first in some situations. I think it's really interesting the squig list actually, Staff of Sneaky Stealing, because Mommet's like okay, but you're typically going to be quite far away from your front line because you're quite aggressive. Speaky Skull Fetish is good because obviously Battle Shock, All Out Attack, Auto Run 6 for the run and charge with squigs. But there's things like Hoarfrost and are brilliant in squig lists, like insanely good. And Staff of Sneaky Stealing just helps get that off. So yeah.
Or even just the importance of getting a squig lure off.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
You just
yeah.
like it can be do or die. Like I've failed a few double ones that you can't re-roll.
Yeah.
So just getting that off with squig lure, like
Yeah.
you buff them up to the 9. So again, that's why I've kind of really appreciated the Staff of Sneaky Stealing right now with the primal dice, which kind of goes here. You talk Hoarfrost. As a Trog player, if you take Hoarfrost, like actually do trolls in general benefit from Hoarfrost? Like, are you trying to either increase or modify the hit, the wound, or the rend characteristic?
Yeah. So if you'd asked me that question 3 weeks ago, I would have said no. But I took it to a 1 day to a couple of weeks ago, and that list that I took them, which we've got later on actually, is my favourite Trog list I've run this edition, and I put Hoarfrost in because I had a unit of 5 bounders, and I thought I'll try it on them. And then what I found actually is Hoarfrost is brilliant in a Trog list, and the reason for that is you put it on the rockets typically. Well, actually always when you're going for the Trogs. If you roll a 1 or a 2, you put it on the wound rolls because they normally wound on freeze. or if you're against an army with debuffs to hit, like if you're against in the Gitz mirror or you're against the Nesh, you can make them hitting on 1s, for example, so you can negate that. And if you roll a 3, you can you put it on the Ren's characteristic. And what that means is you can have 1 unit of Rockguts on Ren 3 from Hoarfrost. You can get the other one on Ren 3 from the Gobapalooza. And then when you bring Moonface Mommet in, you've then got 2 units of Rockguts on Ren 4, plus hopefully 1 unit fighting last from Itchy Nuisance. So I was shocked actually at the value that I was getting from it in that match. It was actually really, really strong in the Trog list, and wounded on 2s as well. Like hitting on 2s, wounding on 2s with Rockguts, doing like 18 attacks from the Trog boss is insane. With Ren 3 damage, it's really good. I'll be taking it in all Trog lists now, for sure.
Yeah, I like that. I've been using it as I've been putting it on my stabbers. So one of my key threats has been the 40 stabbers with spears. I always used to hate spears. I'd always run swords for the 4s and 4s. But I've gone spears with Hoarfrost because I can get that down to hitting on 2s, triggering mortals on 6s from the Loon boss on foot. If I've got the Spore Splatter Fanatics, they're now 2 attacks apiece. I played a game against Mortek Garpi 2 days ago, and I pulled down 4 or 5 Immortus Guard from my stabbers alone.
Wow!
Like from the opponent's like, how did you do that? And obviously, I think I also had like Moonface Mommet in there as well.
Yeah.
But bringing down that characteristic just brings up so much value. But to your point, getting Ren 3 for 3 damage on the Rockguts, or bringing down the to wound to 2s, and you still can issue all out attack. 2s, Ren 2, 3 damage, or Ren 3. It's pretty potent.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's really, really good. Yeah, and I think as well, like I like that trick out, by the way, with the stabbers. I might steal that off you. I've not seen that done yet, so I might try that myself. with Hoarfrost and Mortal Wounds on 6s, that's really nice. Especially hitting on 2s, because I guess you get a huge volume through then, right? So then you just nice for 6s, yeah.
100%. I'm fishing for 6s, and even if you do Moonface Mommet, then there are also what else goes through is still stabbing with a Ren -1. So sheer volume. I played a game against Soul Black Gravelords a few weeks ago, and they turn 1 charged me with Prince Vordry. I deleted him.
Wow.
Then it was my turn at the bottom of turn 1, and I went into a Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon and deleted him. All with the stabber combination. Like as a defensive piece, it's like it's very unassuming, but with Hoarfrost, it's just so good.
Yeah, that's great. You've almost actually built your own Squighead there when I think about it. Because it's high volume attacks, mortals on 6s, right? So it's like high volume, lots of mortals. I like that a lot, actually.
Difference is though, it's mortals on the to wound as opposed to
so you got to get your hits through. Yeah, it's nice. It's really nice. Yeah, I think as well the Hoarfrost on like a unit of 5 bounders, which I'm typically running in my Trog list, which is another reason I brought Hoarfrost is incredible because they normally hit on 4s, and I think where Hoarfrost really brings value is getting units that hit on 4s down to 3s, because they can all attack them to a 2 or a 1. It's the difference in damage output, which obviously they're not pointed for, is brilliant. The unit 5 Boingard Bounders will like take on the world if you give them Hoarfrost. So.
All right, here's my secret sauce before I move into the Merciless Blizzard. I mentioned I've been running a Mega Gargant. One of the other reasons is because of my Gatebreaker with that flail attack, which is 6 attacks, 4s, and bring that 4 down to a 2. And you got those 6 Ren 3 for 4 damage. It's just like delete city.
That's brilliant. That's really nice, actually. That's brilliant. I've been running a Gatebreaker in Sun's list recently with the Gitz Regiment of Renown, and giving them the vial of Manticore to make him wound on 2s. But I couldn't imagine how much damage he must be doing if he's hitting on 2s as well. It's crazy, crazy numbers. Yeah,
it's so nice to get some consistency as a destruction player.
Yeah.
Hoarfrost, I imagine you think is pretty useless. It's not something that, especially now that one, you probably weren't using a Cronspine to begin with. 2, now that it's also been changed, it's probably even less useful. Is that a fair assumption? We can kind of move from Rupture.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I was never doing the whole incarnate thing. I really was not a fan of it. Being able to make your run incarnate wild and then cast spells and throw them in, and Gitz just didn't have the reliability to do it. So I've never taken Rupture yet. So Yeah.
I did think about it in my bad snatches, but outside of bad snatches, even then I ended up dropping it for the mega. But I, as a Trog player, I couldn't see any real reason other than getting all out attack to everyone. But even then, you now have that artifact that you've literally just pointed out that if I need more all out attacks, I would just take the artifact as opposed to a 500-point unit.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, the only real strength of Incarnate, or one of the strengths of Incarnate Gitz, I think, is because you got wizards that you can easily kill. You know, you could send like a Madcap Shaman in turn 1 and give them +1 to charge from the Palooza and just send them in, and you probably could get it wild. But I think the real power from the Incarnates has come from the whole eating endless spell thing. That's why it's made a resurgence, because people are making it wild and eating their own endless spells. And I don't think the Gitz faction is reliable enough to be able to do that, and like versus like a Seraphon or a Zeech who are just putting out endless spells you just can't stop. I think Rupture will be interesting though in lists that lean into like splash mortal damage, which obviously Trogs don't do, but because you can now do D3 mortal wounds to the wizard that casts the endless spell. So maybe you chip damage a wizard and then get rid of the endless spell and he takes another D3. There's some quite interesting stuff in there, but like Talkin Trogs, I don't think so. I'll get to generally, to be honest. I don't think so.
Yeah. I don't see a lot of value in Rupture. But
Yeah.
Blizzard, as a Trog player, is this one of the reasons why you're taking a Madcap or a web spinner to have that little wizard kind of following along with your Trogs? And then now that we can't teleport, so you can't Hand of Gorka wizard into within range and then Blizzard, that was one of the FAQ errata changes. Are you just moving them across the board, or has the value actually decreased that now you wouldn't take a Blizzard wizard?
Yeah, it's like, so it's interesting, Blizzard. I think like pre nerf, like 100% I was taking it, because the ability to just the threat of a 25mm base that could at some point come into your backboard like a web spinner shaman and do 4d6 mortal wounds was phenomenal. Because any big center model or any important model, it's impossible to screen that out for much more than one turn. It's not like a big block of 6 rock guts or a big base that like a Ragnarok Spider that you can screen out quite easily. People are literally going to have to be hugging their backline to stop them getting in. And Merciless Blizzard can be game winning. You can delete a whole unit that's got a 2-up save, for example, just with 46 mortal wounds if you spike. And I've had some big. I one-shot a Trogwood on in this against Seraphon, for example.
It literally changed the Legion of Soulblight Gravelords. I was going to say Legion of Nagash. It literally pivoted Legion of Blood to Legion of Night, because that Ethereal Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon was just getting auto deleted from Blizzard. They just went, nah, we're completely changing Neferata build because of this one spell. So it is game changing, and I appreciate, especially for us in Skaven, who had the ability to teleport around. Whether it was Skitter Leap or whether it's with Hand of Gork, and our casting value, our prices for our units are so low, where a Stormcast Wizard still costs you a lot more, or so.
Yeah, definitely. I think the nerf was right. Like it was too, and especially when you think about like Soul Brights, because the other reason people pivoted to Legion Knight was because you could teleport a hero with a heroic action, so you could teleport your hero, Merciless Blizzard, then in the next turn just teleport them back. So there was zero risk to you doing that. But to go back to your original question, I'm pretty confident I'll still be taking this in a Trog list. I need to obviously try it and see how much I get it off, but I just think the threat of, especially when you're a castle army and people are going to be coming into you to shift you off objectives, you're typically going to be within 12 of your front line with your little heroes, and the ability to get yourself out of combat with this is great. And I still think like one of the best things about it will still be teleporting that 65 wound wizard 9 away, and then your opponent, especially if you're at the end of the turn, so you've gone second, that's such a huge decision for your opponent to make if they win the priority. It's not as easy as just giving you the turn. They can't be like, you take it, because they've got a 65 wound wizard stood 9 inches away from you. And it's good to put your opponent in situations where they can't just make an easy decision about turn order. And I still think Merciless Blizzard teleport will do that. So I still think I'll take it.
Yeah. I am tossing it up, and I'm like, do I really need it? Like last weekend, like I didn't get it off that often compared to like when I was obviously pre-nerf, and it is still a great spell. And the fact that I'm casting it with 65-point wizards, it's low trade-off, but it's not
Yeah.
as often as it happens. And you are putting a lot of your primal dice, so it means you're not getting your other spells off. So it's interesting. It's a good spell, obviously not game-changing, but I think it also gives you that extra threat, and it might allow you to do magical dominance, magical supremacy, where you delete a unit with spells, right?
Yeah.
Between that and Scraggy, that can help unlock it in situations too. So
Yeah,
because we don't really have a lot of like offensive magic, unfortunately, and like I really miss the Great Green Hand of Gork, like the shooting through. Like I miss that spell. Outside of that, it's all debuffs and being annoying. There's no actual like Nick It does D3. Scraggy spell does like lots, but outside of that, there's no real damage dealing spells.
No, there's really not. Yeah, which is probably why Blizzard comes in as well, because it's nice to be able to dig your way out of a pin in the hero phase, and be able to go and play your turn and not just have to fight something annoying that's hung around on one wound. So yeah, I agree.
Love it. Do you have any favorite spells? Like we've talked spells for so long. You obviously don't have any troll spells, but you have talked Gobblepalooza, you have talked Web Spinner Shaman, you have talked Fungoid Cave Shaman, and all of that. Are there any ones that you pick that are favorable? I think they kind of stand out. It's probably 3, maybe 4 that kind of stand out the most. What are your favorites?
Yeah, so I'll like Itchy Nuisance, always taking it. Like Strike Last is such a powerful ability in Age of Sigmar in what's effectively can be an activation wars game, and they've been able to fight on 2 fronts with Troggs and not take a slap back when you're quite low volume attacks. Base is really important, and like low volume, high damage. You want as many attacks as possible. Hand of Gork, like every list, I think will want Hand of Gork. Just having the teleport, just your opponent knowing that you've got a teleport makes them play completely different. It's often better than when you get to a table of Age of Sigmar and you say to your opponent, if you've got any teleports, and say no, you're playing a completely different game because you can just push. But when they have one, it completely changes the game. And then Sneaky Distraction as well, I would call out. Really, really great. It can stack with stabbers or shooters -1 to hit. It can stack with Fell Waters. It can stack with the Gobblepalooza. Just another way of getting that -1 to hit essentially. So yeah, they're my go-tos.
I'd say the Hand of Gork as well is where people will put Primal Magic dice aside and they'll let through your Itchy Nuisance, your Sneaky Distractions, because they want to stop the teleport. So I found psychologically having Hand of Gork is so good, and it's actually worthwhile going Command Entourage or even Warlord, and instead of taking an extra artifact, taking an extra spell, so you can choose as you go through. So because like War Scroll spells are not that good. Like if you look at the Madcap Shaman or even the Fungoid Cave Shaman, the actual War Scroll spells are not that good, very situational. So by having the extra spell choice, it does give you a lot of flex, I found.
Yeah, that's a good shout. I agree. Yeah, and the Fungoid as well, his ability to cast any spell from the lore once a game is really nice as well, just in case you are in a situation where a Nick It's on and you're like, oh, I'll chance a 10 here, so yeah.
Are you someone who likes Glog's Mega Mob? Are you King's Gitz? Or where are you when it comes to like your mindset of building a Trog list?
Yeah, so again, I've been on a bit of a journey with this as well. I've tried 3 different sub-factions this GHB: King's Gitz, Bad Snatchers, and Glogs. Started off with Glogs when I was probably more Trog heavy, but as I've transitioned towards more of a mixed arms list, which I found to be much more stronger, Glogs starts to lose a bit of value. And you've got so much healing anyways that I think typically you're okay. And again, when we talk about the ability to issue the same CP twice from the Dankle Trog boss, you don't need to worry as much about losing models because you can Inspiring Presence a couple. So unless I'm going like super 80% Trogs, I'm not really running Glogs anymore. Started off with Bad Snatchers, really rate that, but just purely because of how in my current Trog builds, Itchy Nuisance is the main spell that I always want with Hoarfrost. I'm putting primals in there, so I'm not typically fishing for the reroll versus maybe like a Grot list or a Spider list where you've got a whole array of spells and you want them all to be coming off. That's why I think Bad Snatchers really has started to have value. But I've probably settled now on the King's Gitz. Because I'm typically not taking Clammy Hands because I've got a Trog Boss General, so I've not got the 2 4-ups, I've just got 1. And yeah, the bringing back units from the Shrine in Gitz makes you really powerful into the late game. And the fact they come back before you contest objectives, only 3 away from your opponent, can be huge as well. And I find with my Trog list, I'm typically using my stabbers early because they're my screen, and getting them back as a unit of 10 reliably is great. And that also opens up a really good battle tactic, which is steal an objective with a summoned unit. So just knowing that by turn 2, you've probably got that summoned unit on the board. I've really, really appreciated King's Gitz, and that's where I've ultimately landed for Trog lists.
All right, so I have a double question coming from Facebook. The first one being from John Sinish, saying, what makes you want to bring the new Truggs herd over, say, King's Gitz? So now we're doing a comparison, right? King's Gitz versus the Trugg herd. Pros and cons, either way.
Good question. I think King's Gitz gives you reliable returning. Versus Truggs Troggherd.
It's a mouthful.
It is a mouthful.
I've struggled.
Yeah. Truggs Troggherd just generally makes you harder to kill. With depending on how you build that list, with a 5-up ward on things like Fell Waters and Dank-Hold Troggoths as well. So the hope with Truggs Troggherd is that you'd lose less models. So the 4-up reroll will be being utilised less. You don't have squishy screens. You don't have that unit of 5 Boingrot Bounders that's died really easily. You've actually got really durable units that hopefully you won't be using. So hopefully you won't be using your Shrine Bring back as much as what you would be in a typical Gitz list. But like comparison wise, I think King's Gitz I think is just better. To be frank, and I think it's just more powerful than the Truggs Troggherd one.
And then the same question, but with the Mega Mob. So you Troggherd versus Mega Mob.
Oh, that's a good question. I think on that front, I guess the issue again though is that with Truggs Troggherd you have to take all Trogs, which is the issue. But if we're thinking about an all Trog build with Glogs versus an all Trog build with Trug, I would go for an all Trog build with Trug. I think, because I think the all Trog build with Trug getting the 5-up ward again. I keep talking about it. The hitting on 6s and shooting attacks if you're against that sort of army. Extra round, extra attacks, all of that stuff for me has such good value in all the phases. Whereas the Glog's Mega Mob ability, you're hopefully going to be fighting with Trogs that are on full health at points anyway, isn't it? It starts having a bit of diminishing value then. So I think if I was going all Trogs, I'd probably go Truggs if we're just talking about the hordes.
And solid not getting your tongue twisted. That was a lot of Truggs.
It was.
That was incredible. That was absolutely incredible. I think there's a lot of questions, right? It obviously is like, is Trug better in Glogs than in, his Army of Renown? And, I'd probably say that I probably personally would take Trug in his Army of Renown if I was doing an all Trog list. But if I wanted that, the Gobblepalooza, if I wanted some Spider Riders, I wanted some other things, then I'm probably not going Army of Renown because obviously I need King's Gitz or the Mega Mob, because I can still run Spider Riders in Mega Mob. They just don't get any benefits for doing so.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think if the question is like, what's the best way to run Trug? I think just a normal Gloomspite Gitz army with one of these hordes, like probably King Gitz for me, is still the answer. But if you're wanting to run an all Trog army, and I mean nothing else, and that's just what you want to do for the weekend or for the game, I think there's a question to be asked, and I think I would lean more towards Truggs to get those army-wide buffs.
Yeah, I love it. Or you could run like a 70% Trog list and then run Bad Snatchers behind it and just get super consistency with your casting. So if you just want to double down on your casts, obviously not Scraggy, but everyone else, you would get. Oh, sorry, and not Zarbag. Zarbag's also King's Gitz.
Yeah.
So look, really quickly, I'm not just. You know what? I'm just going to skip this. I got this for reference, but I'm conscious of time. I think if you're going to run some little wizards, go into and Locust. You don't need to be one drop. Dom, am I in the money there? Like, you don't need wizard finders. It's useless. And Torian Locust, if you're not doing any small wizards, you don't need it. If you are, take it. It's great. The problem extra magic dice is so valuable. I will never leave home without it. It's such a good battalion.
Yeah, I'm totally with you there. It's brilliant. The fact it's a free up in your and their hero phase, you can have like 4 primal dice by the time it gets your opponent's turn, and stopping one spell can be game changing sometimes. So yeah, take it, especially when you've got 65, 70 point wizards.
Yeah, the power difference between us and me getting that extra primal dice when my opponent doesn't gives me the extra chance of the unbind. It allows me to put a primal dice into a spell cast and knowing that I'm still equal with you on primal dice for your unbinds, or I can mirror you. So I found it very empowering and liberating by having extra primal magic dice. Or if we both fail it and at the start of the battle round, I can still generate one, so I've got a 1-0 up you. So highly recommend taking it, especially in a Gitz army. But with the last time that we have here, I do want to talk to you about your lists. So you did provide me a couple of lists. The first one being a Truggs Troggherd with Overshadow, with Trug himself, the General, Prized Troglet, the Polished Nullstone Pebble. And then you have a Dankhold Trog Boss with the Loonstone Teeth. You have 6 Rock Guts, 3 Fellwater, 3 Fellwater, 2 Dankhold, 2 Dankhold Troggoths. Being battle line means you can reinforce them, which is a super neat little trick you've got there. 2 drops, 1,970 points, wrapped up in a battle regiment. So what is this list and what does it do?
Yeah, so this is one I actually played earlier on the week and gave it a go. I mean, essentially, your Truggs Troggherd, so you have to take all Trogs. And I've lent into that idea of taking units that aren't really pointed for a 5-up ward and trying to give them one from Trug. So like early game, you're going quite hard trying to get that. If you want the 5-up ward, right, you want to get it somewhere on those 4 dice. And if you do get that, you've then effectively got some really nice Fellwater screens, which are giving out a -1 to hit, but they're also a 5-up ward, so super hard to kill. And then behind there, you've just got your 2 big hammers in this unit, actually, your Dankhold Troggoths. I think on our first show, when we first spoke about the new book, I think I said I wasn't that impressed with Dankhold Troggoths. Got a very different feeling now. A reinforced unit of Dankhold Troggoths will take on the world. I've one-shot at Archeons with them. I've one-shot at Kragnosses. They are remarkable when you actually read the numbers and then play them and give them all the buffs that you can. I'm not sure there's anything that can survive a hit from 2 Dankhold Troggoths. Go on.
Really quickly, folks, this has come from the AOS app. I've just realized 6 Rock Guts are not 170 points. I wish they were. So the app is still calculating incorrectly. So it is still the fair price, just double it. So obviously Dankhold Troggoths are maths is 380. Your 340 for your Rock Guts. So don't at me that this is an illegal list. do not at me.
Yeah. Yeah, so then you've got your 2 big hammers and your Dankhold Troggoths that you protect. You've got your hopefully more durable screens and your Fellwaters, which are also giving out those -1 hit debuffs. And then you've got the Rocket Troggoths, which are an anvil and a hammer, and will not be reliant on that 5-up ward. So you can even use them as a screen early game with Fellwaters behind them for a -1 debuff. It scores tactics actually quite easily, which I was quite surprised by. So I would swap the artifact and the Dankhold Trog Boss to an Arcane Tome now, having played it through the week, and just to get that magical dominance battle tactic option, probably turn 1. But getting more out of your territory, the ones we spoke about, like taking the objective with 2 units, killing something with Trug, killing the unit with some Troggoths that are affected by the Bad Moon. There's sort of four quite easy tactics floating around in this list. And the grand strategy Overshadow is not bad. Like if you've lost all your battle line, you've probably lost the game. And I think as we discussed, you're giving your opponent a decision to make. Do they sacrifice a battle line to deny you 3 points, which is probably taken away from some of the way they've built their army, or do they put them out front and sort of offer you up that grand strat? It's got some good debuffs, right? You've got the 5-up CP ignore, which is huge if you can turn off an Aura Defense I've spoken about, or an Inspiring Presence. And I've given Trug a 4-up spell ignore as well, essentially, just because he doesn't have one. So you've then got your two main sort of buffing pieces with 4-up spell ignores. So it's a castle that sort of shuffles around, survives, and just hits back really hard. Terrible into high objective missions, I think, but low objective missions where you got 3 or 4 and you just need to hold 2 or 3. I think it'll put some work in.
Any reason why? Because I'm sure some people might be thinking, and this is obviously the argument, is do I do 2 units of 3 Rock Guts or 1 unit of 6? Is it just for the fact that your command point goes further with a unit of 6 and obviously it makes them more durable, easier to rally? Or because you just said, high objectives makes this a little bit harder. So would you not be better off with 2 units of 3? Why combine them?
It's a really good question. Yeah, it was a combination of the fact that the all-out attack from the Trog boss. You don't have Speaky Skull Fetish, so you can only put it in one place in this list. So the +1 to hit and the +1 attack, you might have another +1 attack from Trug. You can put that on that big block of 6. And then secondly, it just becomes a really survivable unit. Whereas I think the risk you run with having 2 units of 3 is if you lose like 1 Trog from every unit, there's not an obvious inspiring presence target, because you might go from you might basically lose an entire unit if you roll a 6, which is a nightmare. So it's just still having that one big reliable anvil that if can just go and lift most stuff with an all-out attack. Essentially, is the idea. And then the exact reason I split the Fell Waters into 2 3s was so I could have them for objective grabbers. At least one unit can be a bit more throwaway in those higher objective missions. You can maybe just auto run them 6 and send them off to see on the objective. Whereas I think with your Rock Guts, you still want them as that anvil and hammer, which I think comes from a brick of 6.
Yeah, I agree. And it's always the discussion, do you do 2 units of 3? Because when they run away or they come back to life, you see a 3 goes to 2, but when you have a unit of 6, it goes from 6 to 3. So you arguably get more value from the shrine, but I would still prefer a unit of 6 personally, because your buffs go further. They're much more of a threat. 3 is not that much of a threat. Like when I see 3 Rock Guts, I'm not that worried, but a 6... that's like playing a Mega Gargant unpinned. I'm going to grind this, and I'm going to concentrate to take that down.
Yeah.
Second list is the King's Gitz. This is Chasing the Moon. Dankhold Trog Boss is the General. Loon Skin. Speaky Skull Fetish. Madcap Shaman. Moonface Morbid. Itchy Nuisance. Web Spinner Shaman with Hoarfrost. Web Spinner Shaman with Sneaky Destruction. 20 Stabbers. 6 Rock Guts. 5 Boing Grots. Gobblepalooza, 5 Spore Splatters, 2 Dankhold Troggoths, and a Scuttletide, which is coming from the Loon Skin. Right? That's free. That's a free one. Yeah, cool. Yeah, because it's the AOS app doesn't have the option to make it free, but when you do War Scroll Builder, there's actually an option that says Loon Skin, Scuttletide, 0 points. Anyway, it's a 2K list. You've got it wrapped up with the Troggherd Heavies and Entorian Acolytes. At a very healthy 11 drops.
Yeah, so I've taken a list almost identical to this to my last 2 tournaments. It's a 2-day and the 1-day, and it's I found it really strong. There's a few iterations here that I've sort of played with. So, for example, I didn't take Loon Skin to one of them. I took Alpha Trog, as we discussed, and maybe found that a bit better. But I still did like the threat from Scuttletide, and then I'm playing around at the moment with Sneaky Distraction versus Merciless Blizzard. We've already sort of covered that, the pros and cons of the two. But I've found with this list, it's first of all, it's great at scoring tactics. You've got the Boingrot Bounders, who are a bit of a unit that can either go and get you an early stab them in the dark. So go off and kill a unit with, you put Hoarfrost on them, you put the Gobblepalooza Rend on them. Suddenly, you've got like 11 attacks at 2s and 3s, -3, 2 damage. It's going to clear most small screens that your opponents put up, and then you don't care if you lose them turn 1 because you bring them back from the shrine. And again, you've got that tactic for later on. You can use them to take a board edge. Similarly, you could try and teleport Shaman out to a board edge with Sneaky Distraction, just leave them there for a turn, but keep them within 24 of Hand of Gork so you can bring them back later. It's going to kill stuff. It's got a lot of output. And I think where this list I've found really, really ticks is the buffs that you can stack on the Rock Guts and the Dankhold. So you've got your Bounders running around, just lifting screens, causing people problems. You've got Scuttletide running around the back of the board. So you are impacting your opponent's army and forcing them to have to come to you because they can't just sit there, essentially. And then by the time they're on objectives with you, that's when this army really goes. And that's when you put your Rich Nuisance on, you push your Rock Guts in, one thing's fighting last, you put your Gobblepalooza Rend up, you get your Hoarfrost up for -3 on another one, you've got your Moonface Mommet, so you've typically got -4. And then the Spore Splatter Fanatics are absolutely brilliant, I think, in the Trog list, because you can lose 3 Rock Guts from a unit of 6, but with all out attack from the Trog boss and the unit of Spore Splatter Fanatics, they still have the same output as 6, which is incredible. And if all the stars align, you can get the Dankhold Troggoths on, so you get +1 hit from the Spore Splatters, you get +1 from the Trog boss. You can get them on 12 attacks, 2s and 2s, effective -4 ends, D3 plus 3 damage. So that's a minimum 4 damage plus an extra 1 or 2. And I put 2 of them into Kragnos, like I said, and I think they did 44 wounds were calculated after saves. So they're just the piece that when the opponent's got that one big survivable unit, they'll just go in and lift it. It's really great, right? You got the Stabbers for an early game screen along with the Gobapalooza. So it's like a castle army, but it's also got the ability to spring out and cause problems. And this is my favorite Trog list that I've played so far. This GHB, it just does everything, which is how I like to build my lists.
Yeah, I like it. It's good. This is probably like, I'm not the biggest troll fan, like Troggoth fan. Like I've only got like 6 Rockguts and the Dankhold Trog boss, obviously, and the king as well. But when I look at this, I'm like, yeah, this is more my style. Like I don't want to go full Trog, but definitely like taking advantage of the Stabbers, having some fanatics, the Boingrots, the Gobapalooza, the Web Spinner Shamans, the Madcap Shamans. I actually really like this a lot. It's definitely more my style, although there's no triumph. So, but
yes,
I guess the sneaky skull fetish is going to get me out of most situations, other than the ones where I can't use inspiring presence.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But they're super situational. The last list, and I do have a couple of final questions when we close this list off, is a Glogs Mega Mob chasing the moon. You got a Madcap Shaman, Moonface Moment, Itchy Nuisance, Web Spinner Shaman, Sneaky Distraction, the Almighty King himself, Trug, who's the general, and then the Dankhold Trog boss with Speaky Skull Fetish. You got 20 Stabbers, 6 Rockguts, 3 Fellwater, 1 Dankhold Troggoth, 5 Gobapalooza. So got a lot of commonality with the last list. Obviously, the introduction of Trug, and you've got Entorian Acolytes, but Battle Regiment and the Troggherd Heavies. 5 drops.
Yeah, so I try to sort of like lean into find a nice halfway house between the Trug book and then obviously like the normal Gitz book here. And I think that the key differences I'd point out is that I have gone for Glogs here, because I've got 2 6 Rockguts, 3 Fellwaters, and 1 Dankhold, plus Trug, plus the Trog boss. So actually a large volume of my army is Trog. It's got the Troggoth keyword, so that they're all going to benefit from that. And there's less units here that I'm going to be losing early game and trying to bring back from King Gitz. So I get less value from King Gitz generally across a 5-round game as well. So that's what sort of pushed me towards Glogs Mega Mob here. I've made Trug the general. Because I think by doing that, it makes chasing the moon, hopefully, even easier. Because, especially if you get that 5-up ward on him. So early on in the game, you just keep giving him that 5-up ward. He's going to be really hard to kill. So that's a really nice way of guaranteeing that grand strat. But also, I think what it then does is it actually enables you to use the Trog boss as a bit of a different piece. And you can be more aggressive with him. So you still give him Speaky Skull Fetish, which I would take in every Trog list because it's just so good. And the value of it just stacks across a game. But you can be more aggressive with him, so you can push him into combat and you can do some really interesting techie bits of play with the 6-inch move and things like that. With the heroic action that we spoke about earlier, Wade and Smash. So I really like that build on him and being able to play with him differently. And I've gone for sort of a debuff of -1 to hit from the Web Spinner Shaman. So because this is way more of a castle build than the last list. This is like a proper castle army with a couple of screens and just some hard hitting units behind.
Not to actually you. Not cool. I was freaking out for a second. I haven't used Troggherd Heavies often, and I'm sitting there going, "How has he got 2 artifacts?" And I was literally just flicked over the screen, and it is magnificent. So that is how you get the. I've never used Troggherd Heavies because I've never run Dankhold Troggoth. So I'm like, there's no Warlord, there's no Command Entourage. I'm like, is this an illegal list? Like people are gonna at me.
Yeah, Troggherd Heavies is such a great core battalion. One of the other reasons why I think Truggs Troggherd loses out, if you could take battalions from the Gitz book, I think it would just really help elevate it. But yeah, Troggherd Heavies is great, and you can have a reinforced unit at Dankhold. Troggoths do it as well. But yeah, being able to take an extra artifact for like 2 units that you typically take in the Trog list anyways, it opens up Moonface Mommet without having to sacrifice Acolytes. So
yes,
super neat.
Yes. Or you could go the extra spells like I've previously talked about.
Yeah.
But I do like it, the artifacts. It's just literally point and click at the start of the hero phase. You're now combat phase. You're now -1 to your save. So and it's 12-inch range, so it's very, very generous, I found.
Yeah, definitely.
I like that there's 3 lists that are obviously not like the lists. Like, don't copy them and run them at tournaments. Like, it doesn't mean these are the silver bullets. Just a few examples that Dom has put together, either from his experience or things that he's playing around with, or at least have worked for you. Couple of burning questions that I haven't spoken about just yet before we kind of bring this home. First one is coming from Cristobal. Good question, by the way. It's a bit of a 3-parter. Actually, it's technically a 4-parter. So I'm going to break this up.
Cool.
Opinions on Mollog. Poor old Mollog is the only Trog that's not featured in any of your lists.
Well, funnily enough, I was actually going to take him to the Invitational this weekend before Trug came out. Yeah, I think Mollog is useful to open up battalions. If there's a certain battalion that you want to run, he's like if you want to try and get your drops down, you've already sacrificed, your Trug boss for the Troggherd heavies. You could pop Mollog in there, and he can go in there, and he's less than 10 wounds, so he opens up a few others. But I think the problem he's got is I think he's not as effective as a damn called Troggoth, although he's younger. He's less points. He doesn't do as much for your army as a Trug boss. So I don't think he's ever really going to get in there over them. He's unique, so he can't take artifacts or command traits in the normal book. He could, I suppose, do it in the Regiment of Renown. But yeah, I think I'd love to see them just do something else with him, whether it's whether he gets, I don't know, a dispel or something, or just can give out another buff to your army. That'd be nice. But I think even at 130 points, I think he just doesn't quite bring enough in terms of the points that other things he's competing with.
I look at Mollog and I genuinely do not have a reason to take it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm looking at the abilities right now, and there's nothing I'm like, I really want this. Like, at least Zarbag's spell has been improved, and I'm like, you know what? That I would take. But I'm looking at this going, right, the Spite Shroom, the Bat Squig, the Stalix Squig. Like, okay. Like, yeah. All right. Like, give me a wizard keyword in here. Give me this as a wizard or a priest. Now we're cooking with gas. Otherwise, as you said, it's just a lesser version of something else in this book.
Yeah, 100%. If they made him a priest, that'd be great. I'd love a priest in Gitz. So
a priest in destruction would be great.
Yeah.
All right, part 2 of that is the Rabble Rouser, the new little goblin who can make you run and charge for monsters if you are moving towards it more. That's a very simplified, terrible way to explain its rules, but basically it makes you go fast if you move towards it.
Like, brilliant in the Gargants list is what I would say. Sensational in the Regiment of Renown and Gargants. But that's because you can deliver him at the back of the board. You can bring him on the board edge. I honestly, personally, don't see loads of value in him in a Gitz list, because the monsters that we have, that in my opinion are typically going to be running and charging, are like your squig, your mangler squigs, if you're even taking them, and they can run and charge under the light of the bad moon anyways. So if you're running a Loon Blossom and a mangler squig, you can get him stuck in earlier. But even then, I don't think you're really seeing them. In many
hold up. What about, and entertain me for a second? You've talked to me the benefits of Alpha Trog. So my general is now 2 wound monster.
Yeah,
I've got Hand of Gork to deliver that Rabble Rouser on the other side of the board. So Scraggy or Friend can teleport. Would that be adding value to your army?
Yeah, it could speed them up, and deliver it a bit better. I think the tricky thing I find with Trogs, though, is because it's a castle, anything that's like a monster in my list, I don't typically want to be like leaving it. So I don't necessarily want to be like sending Trog too aggressively into the front line. If he's got his 5-up ward and he's got the -1 hit and wound debuff, if I could have put that on him, I could have been tempted by it. But if it doesn't come off and you lose him, you've lost like a lot from your army. And the other thing that's difficult is because it's reliant on a spell in Git. I would love that if he could have deep strike, I probably would have felt differently, because you are reliant on that spell, and most people you play are trying to stop Hand of Gork. It becomes tricky, and you have to do things like you have to finish like your pile in nearest him as well, I think. So once like you're past him, it can get quite difficult actually to be able to like be where you want to be from that point on in the combat phase. So there'll definitely be some like interesting players in there. Where I actually think it could be really interesting is in a Moon Clan list as your general, because he can take Clammy Hands and he's got a 4-up ward when he's like more than 6 away from your opponent. So if you want a more survivable general for chasing the moon, I think he's got play there. And then his D3 mortal wounds in the shooting phase at some point. It's just a nice little bonus. So I think he's interested in like a Moon Clan list where you want a survivable general.
Yeah, the feeling is generally across the board. In Gitz, not that useful. In Gargants, absolutely incredible. So it's good. And I literally just had a conversation the other day with a Gargant player talking about the rabble rouser in the faction. 2 final questions. I'm gonna skip the other part of crystal balls. It's like, asking about. We've already talked about chaff, so we kind of very acknowledge that. To rewind for a second to go back to Trugg's Army of Renown. Given that we have talked about the benefits of screening through the likes of the Gobberpalooza or even the Stabbers, I can't access them in the Army of Renown. So do you have any advice or any thoughts in regards to screening and or trying to keep Trog alive against Alpha Strikes? And I guess I'm a little worried that in this same book, we've also got new Iron Jaws and, got the Piggies and we've got the new Morpig, and we might see that build kind of come back, these alpha aggressive in-your-face turn 1, turn 2s. Yeah. What can I do as an Army of Renown to protect and screen and keep Trog alive?
It's a good question. So first of all, I think Fell Waters are nice for the -1 to hit. I mean, obviously, if your opponent's taken first, you're not going to have your 5-up ward up, sadly. But the -1 to hit will definitely help. But the way that I would play it and the way I played it in the week is I just kept everyone really tightly packed in. So your opponent could alpha you, and maybe they will take out your fells, turn 1, for example, but they're going to get hit back because your big hammers like your Dawnbringers, Troggoths, and your Rock Guts are within 3 of your screens. So it gives your opponent a decision to make. Like, they might alpha you, but if you double them with that much output, you might even be in a much better position than they are come turn 2. And that's actually what we found when we played through the week. I was playing a squig list, and he hit me hard turn 1. But because I got the double into the next turn, I dug my way out, and there was pretty much nothing left because not much is going to survive 4 Dawnbringers, Troggoths, and Rock Guts and Trug on the hit back. So just really pack up and don't let your opponent hit a screen without being hit back, is what I'd say.
Yeah, great call. Really good call. Final question is a bit more of a fun one coming out of Crutchhammer from Josh Griffith. What would you like to see to incorporate into the Trogs into the future? So this is be aspirational here. So this might tie into Stuart's talk about 4th edition, or maybe Dawnbringers 5 Electric Boogaloo is going to bring us more Trog units. What do you want to add to Trogs?
Great question. I mean, the Troglet that came with the Trug, the tiny little Trog that goes on his back. So you've seen that, the baby Trog. Like maybe some like tiny little Trog wizards. You've also got the Fellwater with the trumpet as well, who came in one of the unique packs, who's like tiny. I definitely wouldn't say no to that. A couple of like small Trog wizards that you could put into Truggs Troggherd would be super useful. If they could make them 5 wounds as well, I really wouldn't be grumbling at that. Just to count as 2 on objectives rather than 1. 4 is like the trap point, I think, where like it's a good wound characteristic, but it doesn't do you much for objective control. So I would take those 2, and maybe even bring back the original Trog King as well, the OG Trog King, whose name has escaped me, but from the fantasy days. I think Truggs maybe filled his shoes now. So
yeah, I just had this epiphany for a second while we were talking. I'm like, I wonder if I can use the world's greatest ally in the Marshcrawler Troggoth. I'm like, here's the Troggoth keyword. And I just reread the rules, and it's like, you must have both the Gloomspites Gitz keyword and the Troggoth. I'm like, damn it, I can't bring my Marshcrawler. So there's another thing that I can't do as an Army of Renown. I'm like, I thought I found something sneaky as a Gitz player, but nah, I've been out sneakied. I don't know what I would want. Like, I obviously I want my troll hag in some variety. Bring me a plastic sculpt. But outside of that, like, it's hard to see. Maybe like a Nurgling version. Maybe some type of a. I don't know. I don't know actually.
obviously, like if I'm playing a lot of trolls, I don't have a lot of long range threats. I don't have a lot of screens. I don't have like what do I? But that's where other parts of Gitz kind of comes in. So
yeah.
A monster, like a mounted monster, or like some type of even like a random monster creature with that's just monster, not hero monster. I don't know.
Yeah, that'd be cool. Like maybe go down like the Maya Brute angle, but with Troggoths maybe, and give them like a little grot on the back of a wild dank hold or something like that. I don't know. That could be quite cool. Something that would be quite interesting.
Squig troll. A squig troll.
Yeah, squig troll. Yeah, that would be the one.
Dom, this has been awesome. This has been really insightful. I am feeling, just to kind of summarize the episode, I'm feeling like the new rules are interesting. There's definitely some interesting play in there. There's obviously a trade-off and a sacrifice by going the Army of Renown over a traditional King's Gitz or a mega mob type of build. Pros and cons on either side. I think we've brought some good discussion to the party when it comes to, do I bring in the king or do I not bring in the king? Do I which choice I make, and what might be a part of my combinations, and where we kind of stand in the GHB. And is there anyone that you want to like say hello to? Any shout outs? If people want to talk to you more, I know you're active on X. Where can they find you?
Yeah, so X, I'm Troghammer on X. They keep calling that instead of Twitter.
Still it's so weird. It's so weird. Makes me feel like I'm like on like a porn site or something. Like, come check at me on X.
Yeah, hit me up on X. It's Troghammer. I'm on. We've got a YouTube channel now as well for my team, 9 Inch Fails. So you can get us on there as well if people are interested. And then I'm always happy to talk AOS, especially around like Trogs or Gitz in general. And I'll just shout out my 9 Inch Fails teammates. I think we're doing sort of lots of work behind the scenes at the moment, like get a YouTube channel up and running and stuff like that. And just a great bunch. So I'll just give them a shout out as well.
I'll put the link in the description for both the channel and the X/Twitter profile. So highly recommend checking out Dom. Not only do I really enjoy your Twitter and you've put a lot of great pictures, but also Stuart as well, who asked one of those questions. You two have just incredible banter, and I do enjoy the Trog discussion. Even though I'm a grot, you do treat me a little bit kindly, although I think you're a bit like kindergartening to me. Like I treat me like a child. I'm like, I'll stab you in the kneecap. Yeah. I'll stab you in the kneecap. Like, don't do that to me.
Love it. Especially with Hoarfrost. Even worse.
Yep. You know my secrets. Folks, I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you enjoyed Dom's thoughts. And again, go check out his YouTube channel. Go check out his X/Twitter profile and go follow that along. If you enjoyed this, please like and leave me a comment. Would love to hear what your thoughts are. Maybe we didn't talk enough about the Mollog. Maybe you have a thought around what we want to add to Dawnbringers 5 Electric Boogaloo, especially to take advantage of that rule around monsters and 2 roars and yada, yada, yada that we can't really tap into from the Army of Renown. But Dom, thank you for your time. I'm going to go to bed because I'm an old man and I have work in the morning. But I hope you enjoyed this discussion. Like, subscribe, do all the YouTube stuff. And until next time, make sure to... What do we want to do? We want to make sure you roll 3 on your heals. Always heal.
Always heal. Never forget to heal. Yeah.
Always be healing. ABHs. Let's see, folks. Bye. Thanks for hanging around until the end. I hope you enjoyed that video and you walked away with a few new ideas. Now, if you did, I would love it if you pressed like on the video, as well as left me a comment with your thoughts. The conversation will continue over on Discord, and the link is down below in the episode description. I also want to give a massive shout out to the AOS Coach patrons and YouTube members who are supporting the channel and the growth that you're seeing here. So cheers, you are all bloody legends. And until next time, don't roll a 1-1 on a spellcast.